Well, hello there, ladies and gents. Sorry for starting slightly late. I'm actually waiting for my guest to appear. I guess while we're waiting, I might as well play some seasonal music. And that was the band of Her Majesty's Royal Marines. I'm still waiting for my guest. Sure he won't be very long. Hoping everybody is having a good Christmas or getting ready for a good Christmas, and hopefully what will be a happy new year, although I have to say I have some doubts about that with the various ridiculous lockdowns for the China virus, etc. I've also just heard that a deal has been struck on Brexit. I have no idea what the actual deal is, of course, because I haven't had the time to look at it, but it certainly wasn't looking particularly good from a Brexiteer's point of view over the last couple of weeks. Boris Johnson, I think, will probably let down most of those people who voted for him at the last general election, expecting him to deliver a real Brexit. But I'm not, as I say, I haven't had a chance to look at the actual details of the deal, but a deal has been struck, and I was certainly one of those hoping for no deal and a WTO rules Brexit myself. Speniferous. I lived in South Africa for 15 years after I left the British Army, and I have lived in Australia for 20 years, so I probably do have a slightly strange accent in that regard. But I was actually born in London, right in the middle of London on the south side of the river, a place called Bermondsey. For quite a long time when I was a child, I actually lived within 10 minutes walk of Tower Bridge. So I'm certainly a real Englishman, but yeah, I have spent quite a lot of time overseas in former or current Commonwealth countries. Old Commonwealth countries in the sense of the old Commonwealth used to be Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and back in the day, South Africa. So that's where I've spent most of my time. I have actually visited about 50 countries altogether, but I've only lived in 3 for any long length of time. And all originally, at least partially, British in origin. So yeah, there's that. I was actually just finished watching Academic Agent's video, which was looking at old film of London from about 1900 right up until the 1980s. And it's a very good video. I recommend people to watch it after this stream. And they will find it kind of graphically shows the way Britain has fallen over the last 120 years in all sorts of ways, including demographically, of course. So yeah, why we stopped saying Britisher, I don't know that we ever did, really. I think it's just something that people don't use very often. I know I was having a discussion about this with some friends of mine a few months ago, that when people used to refer to the British race, they really meant the majority of the population, not just in the British Isles, but also most people in Canada and Australia and New Zealand, and also in South Africa as well. Although not really most in South Africa. The English-speaking part of the South African population, certainly when I moved there in the mid-1980s, was about 40% English-speaking. The white population was about 40% English-speaking and about 60% Afrikaans-speaking. Good evening, Aaron Hook. So yeah, when people used to talk about the British race, they didn't just mean the British Isles. They actually meant the whole of what was called the old Commonwealth, which, as I say, was originally Canada and Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa. That was the old Commonwealth, the places that became the self-governing dominions that were mostly or largely created by British settlers in the 18th and 19th centuries. So I've got no idea what today's stream is going to be about, apart from that it will be fairly laid back. It's just basically going to be me chatting with Brutus, unless Brutus wants anyone else to come on. I haven't asked anyone else, but he certainly can when he turns up, which hopefully will be shortly. Well, this might be a fairly short stream. South Africa stabbed Rhodesia in the back. Yeah, they did a bit, actually, because they were trying at that stage, South Africa at that stage, were trying to do deals with surrounding African nations, which of course didn't really work out very well for them in the long run. But that was certainly what they were trying to do. And they thought that by cutting off aid to Rhodesia, they would get kind of kudos from the surrounding Black African nations. They didn't, of course, because, it was the whole old domino theory, once Portuguese Angola and Mozambique fell, then things got harder for Rhodesia. And once Rhodesia fell, then things got harder for South Africa. So, it didn't, it wasn't really a good policy for South Africa. But there again, I was a British guy who was completely pro-Rhodesian back in those days. I'm quite an old bugger. I'm 55, so I kind of do remember Rhodesia being Rhodesia just about when I was a boy and a teenager. So not really a very good policy, I don't think. And here we have Brutus. How you going, mate?
I'm not ready. Are you live? I'm not ready,
yes,
mate.
We're live. If you want a couple of minutes, I can keep talking while you mess around.
Okay. All right. Give us a sec. Thank you.
Just mute yourself. Yeah. Okay. So Brutus will be joining us shortly. So yeah, I've got nothing. I was just going to say, Wolf, I'm not a big fan of the Britisher on YouTube. I was actually quite happy when he stopped doing streams with Academic Agent. I think he's one of those guys who never says 5 words when he can say 50. And he's also a complete fence-sitting, middle-of-the-road Civnat sort of bloke. So, not my favourite guy. So it is a bit tarnished from that association, I suppose. I don't think Brutus is much like the Britisher in terms of his political views at all. And I also don't think he's anywhere near as wordy. So, I mean, I quite admired the British for his knowledge of the Roman Empire, but he even managed to make that boring, which I think is quite a difficult subject to make boring because they're quite interesting. Yeah, same here for a fall. When I was a boy, it was still Rhodesia too. When I lived in South Africa from 1985, I knew lots of Wenwes. South Africans used to call Rhodesians Wenwes because they often used to begin a sentence when we were in Rhodesia. So they were known as Wenwes in South Africa, but most of them were very, very good people. I can't say I met many bad Rhodesians at all, actually. But then I didn't meet many bad South Africans either, actually. I was... I like South Africans. I've still got South African friends. Several of my friends since I left, which was in 2000, have been murdered. And what they all had in common was they all lived in isolated rural areas. So I can say for a fact that the white farm murders over there is certainly not something that is not happening, as some left-wing people will try and tell you. It certainly is happening. There are some good South African channels on YouTube. One guy I follow in particular is a bloke called Conscious Caracal. He's got a very good channel, well worth following, and he also works for AgriForum, which is a kind of farmers organization in South Africa, which tries to do its best to publicize farm attacks and also to organize farmers so they can resist land expropriation and that kind of stuff. So Conscious Caracal is a good channel to follow, and he also has quite a lot of other South Africans on his channel, so he's kind of a good gateway to get into other people. South Africa is a beautiful bloody place. I still miss the game reserves. I must be honest, even after 20 years, I still miss the game reserves, especially Umfolozi Shushului, which I used to visit quite a lot. So I was kind of based in Northern Natal for quite a long time. And I actually miss the Zulus, strange to say. The Zulus on the whole are actually pretty good people. And they have no time whatsoever in general for the ANC, because they have their own political party, the Inkatha Freedom Party. And they support that rather than the ANC. I also once met the Zulu King, King Goodwill, at a place called Nongoma in the north of Zululand near the Black Umfolozi River. And that was pretty cool. He's the only royal person I've ever met, unless you count, I think, the there was a royal who walked past me on a British Army parade once, but he certainly didn't notice me. So anyway, so that's that one. Hopefully Brutus will be with us in a sec. Anyone doing anything particularly interesting for Christmas? If you're allowed to, of course. I know UK Christmas has been pretty much cancelled by our glorious leader, Alexander Boris Johnson, for this basically not very deadly virus, which has got something like a 99.7% survival rate. Certainly if you're under about 80 and not already very sick. And yet they are destroying the economy and also destroying British civil liberties over this nonsense. And sadly, many British people are letting them do it, which I think is a bit of a shame.
You all right?
Yeah, you all right now, mate?
Yeah. Does my mic sound all right?
Yeah, not too bad at all.
Cool. Right. What's up? What's going on?
I've just been chatting a little bit about South Africa.
Yeah, you said you met the king. That's pretty cool.
I met the Zulu king. Yeah, I did years and years ago now. Like, oh bloody hell! I was in my 20s. So, but yeah, in a place called Nongoma. He's quite a cool chap actually.
I thought you were a Navy boy.
No, my son is in the Navy, but I'm an Army bloke, mate.
Oh, right, okay, that makes sense.
My family were all Army, but my late wife came from a naval family, and because at the time when my son was a teenager, he was and he wanted to join the forces, and I was not at all keen on these absolutely useless wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I couldn't see the purpose of going and getting killed in Afghanistan when it was quite plain we had no intention or plan of winning, and we're eventually just going to leave. And so I put him off the army, and because his mother was in the Navy, he kind of just went in that direction.
Yeah, didn't we got beat by the Afghanis in the 19th century as well, didn't we? So it's
kind of.
Best not to pick a fight with the mountain men, I think.
Kind of, Brutus. It's not really true to say we got beaten by them. A British army got destroyed in the first Afghan war,
right?
In 1838-42. But then another British army went there and beat the shit out of them, and then we left. And then in the second and third Afghan wars, the second Afghan war, which was 1878-1880, we did lose one battle at a place called Maiwand. But basically won most of the war, which was basically to keep the Russians from invading the damn place. And then the third Afghan war, they tried to invade British India because in 1919, a rumor spread amongst all the tribesmen that all the British soldiers had been killed in the First World War. So they attacked British India, and unfortunately for the Afghans, not all the British soldiers had been killed, and they got defeated very nicely. Speniferous, I don't understand why you think I've been drinking heavily for Christmas, because I actually haven't. I don't think you realize in Australia it's 5:21 a.m. in the morning.
Oh, it's actually Christmas there.
It's new. No, it's Christmas Eve, but it's 5:21 in the morning.
Oh, it's
actually no, I'm bullshit. It's Christmas Day.
It's Christmas Day. Yeah, it's Christmas Day. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas to you. But it's actually 5:21 in the morning, and I'm drinking coffee. So I don't know. I think this is a calumny I'm going to have to fight against.
You have to get a few beers later on.
Oh mate, listen, I've got a bottle of Pusser's rum that my son sent me. He sends me either a bottle of Pusser's rum or a bottle of Plymouth gin for my Christmas and my birthday. So
I like to drink Bailey's at Christmas. That's my drink.
Bailey's Irish Cream, yeah, I've had that. Yeah. I tend to stick to gin or rum these days, or occasionally I'll drink decent Scotch like the Lefroy or something like that.
I could never stand gin. I got a bottle of gin a year ago, and I never drank it. I drank a little bit. I don't like it. So there you go. Can never understand it. You ever hear about the gin craze in when did that happen? 18th century. You ever read about that?
Yeah, Gin Lane and all that stuff.
Gin Mania. Yeah, apparently, because of the war with France, I think, probably the 7 Years' War or something. So we couldn't get any wine, so people started drinking gin instead. But they would drink. Yeah, they were just chugging it down like a pint of gin.
Yeah,
and going crazy all over the place. Yeah.
They used to have gin in South Africa during the time of the Anglo-Zulu War, sort of Rorke's Drift and the San Luana and all that kind of stuff. Right. And the Zulus used to call gin the Queen's Tears. Which I always thought was kind of cute. Anyway, I don't know what you want to talk about, Brutus, but you go ahead, mate, because I'm open for any subject. All we've been talking about before you arrived was, as I say, a little bit of stuff about South Africa and traveling, and also AA's recent video, which looked at old film of London from 1900 up to the 1980s and showed how the place has been ruined basically during that period.
Yeah, I like AA. It's a shame that he won't have me on his show, but anyway, there you go.
Well, he may do at some point. I
don't know. I think I've upset his Aryan princess, you see, and that avenue has been closed down. But maybe you'll have more luck than me. But at some point,
she's not been on there for ages either. So,
no, I don't know, mate. I don't know. I haven't talked to her in ages.
Since she got kicked off Twitter, it's harder to get hold of her.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm actually hoping to do a stream with Dora of Albion at some stage.
Yeah, you should do it. Yeah, definitely.
I've got another one coming up with Colin Liddell in the new year.
Oh yeah, he's a good. Yeah, he's a steady rock. He is. I like him a lot. I used to hate him. I used to absolutely detest him because when I first got involved in this thing, I was big into the Daily Stormer, and Colin Liddell was very critical of it, and so I just thought, who's this guy, this boomer, doesn't understand anything. And now, like 4 years later, it's like, oh, okay. Yeah, I get it now. So there you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like Colin. He correctly he predicted Brexit.
Yeah.
He also correctly predicted that Trump would win in 2016.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good guy. I think he misses the point with the JQ, but I think everyone does. But anyway, there you go. No one's perfect.
Well, I tend to be closer to him on that than I am you, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
What about he doesn't deny it. He just doesn't think it's the be all and end all, and I'm very much of that opinion myself. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean, but I think they are powerful, and I think you need an enemy. I mean, even Adolf said that you need to unite people around an enemy. It's kind of good for our spirits. So
I don't know. I think it also makes it very difficult for nationalism to go in certain directions.
Yeah.
If it's overblown, you like I don't mind if people say there's this and there's this and in particular areas, absolutely right. Yes, there is some truth in the JQ thing, but when, as some people do, particularly some Natsoks, they blame Super Jews for everything.
Mm.
And to me, that is, first of all, it's demeaning to non-Jewish people because it means we're completely controlled. We're mere puppets of this quite small group of people, and it also defies common sense because there are so many non-Jewish people and in fact white people who have done lots of bad stuff to our own people, I mean,
yeah, but it's just, I mean, have you ever seen Boy Guide to World History? You ever seen that by E. Michael Jones?
Yeah,
6 hour long document. Well, but there you go. I mean, that's how it works for me. I mean, it's just once you look at the historical perspective and you see the influence that they've had, it's like they're not behind everything, but they're kind of, every time there's a key historical happening, they just tend to be there, and this just adds up over time.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, I don't say there's no such thing as the JQ, but I think that concentrating on it is a mistake for nationalists. I really think so.
Yeah.
I mean, not only because it limits what we can say, but because if you say anything about that, you immediately get associated with the extreme wings of the Natsok types,
Yeah.
And people will start talking about cattle cars and gas chambers and all the rest of it, you know?
Yeah.
As soon as you say anything about it. And I think for that, I mean, I think Colin Liddell actually had a good article on the Affirmative Right website where he said that basically because the alt-right went so heavily on that stuff, they kind of made it unapproachable for quite a long time now, just because they went overboard on it, you know? And particularly the Nazi-tard side of it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, perhaps again, the problem is not the JQ itself; it's the Nazi stuff that's the problem. And if you could separate the JQ from the Nazi stuff,
yeah, if you could,
then,
if you could, I agree.
then you'd be okay.
It's almost impossible, though, isn't it? That's the trouble. It's very difficult.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's a tricky one, but it's got to be done. I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, you know how I feel about it. That's the root of the problem. It's this obsession with Adolf Hitler that's really shot us in the leg.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I mean, even when it comes to Churchill, like a lot of people will say in reply, they'll say Churchill was in bed with the Jews and et cetera, et cetera. I don't even have a problem with that. I mean, I accept it. I just think that Churchill was a man of his time, and like many leaders in Europe, throughout European history, I mean, he had his court Jews, right? He associated with Jewish people. It's not like he was the first person to do it. He just saw they were part and parcel of the British Empire. That's all. And I think the correct way to spin it would just be say, instead of denying that Churchill was involved with them, it would be to say, well, they betrayed Churchill and they betrayed us, and we had a stab in the back. You know, in the same way that the Nazis, they go on about Germany got a stab in the back in the First World War. That should be our narrative. We, I mean, yes, the British Empire was in part a Jewish empire. Yes, we did fight the Second World War in part for the Jews. I mean, we certainly created Israel. I don't think we should deny these things, but the narrative should be that they betrayed us, which is the truth. They did. So that's how I
don't know. You say we created Israel, and yet in the 1940s you had Zionists, terrorists, and they were terrorists, hanging captured British NCOs and blowing up British civilians in the King David Hotel and all that sort of stuff. So they weren't exactly our allies at that stage, to be honest.
Yeah, but there was the Balfour Declaration, though, wasn't it?
Well, there was the Balfour Declaration, yeah, which I think was probably a foolish thing to have done when they did it. But I don't know. Look, I'm entirely neutral on Israel. I don't care about Israel one way or the other. I don't regard them as an ally. I don't regard them as an enemy. I certainly am, but I'm certainly not an ally of the Palestinians either, because the Palestinians are not our mates. So yeah. Anyone who thinks they are is an idiot, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I think they just need to be talked about and brought out into the open, because they need us for defense. Otherwise, they're going to end up having a war with Iran, and they don't want that. So, you know, I don't believe we should be advocating for the destruction of Israel, because I don't really see how that benefits us, other than some kind of revenge. And that's not really a clever thing to do in the game of politics. So I would just play them. I mean, I would just say, look, you Israelis, you've got to tell your Jewish friends that live here to stop advocating for mass immigration and all this left-wing stuff. Otherwise, we're not going to help you anymore. You know what I mean? That would be the way I'd play it. Just bring it out into the open. But I mean, currently, the problem is you're not allowed to talk about that subject because you get shut down and you get called an anti-Semite.
Yeah, and I know, as I say, I think, honestly, it's because it's not the main problem in UK, in my opinion anyway. I don't think it's the main problem in the UK. I think the main problem in the UK and the most urgent issue is stopping mass third-world immigration. I think we are better off, for the time being at least, ignoring it largely.
Yeah. Oh, the phone's ringing.
No worries. By the way,
sorry, yes, my mum. She's called me for Christmas. I'll phone her back. It's all right.
I didn't advertise this anywhere, Brutus, but if you want to have anyone on, feel free to ask somebody if you want to. I didn't bother today.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I would get drunk. We could do like a proper stream, but I've only just woken up because I'm still kind of readjusting from my night shift. So I've slept most of the day, But yeah, I don't know. I mean, you can bring people on if you want. I don't know.
No, I had no intention of doing so, but I was going to say to you, if you've got people you want to invite, feel free. I didn't bother today.
Yeah, don't know, mate. Yeah, I just finished reading that. When I finished reading the book on the Union Jack, that was quite interesting.
Yeah, I read that. Yeah, I've read that.
That guy called, I forget his name, Devonshire guy he is. But I was very interested to find that the tree colours of the Irish flag and of course the French flag, that the first time the tree colour was flown was in the Dutch Revolution of well, it was William I, but I don't know when that was. Dutch Revolution, that would have been
late 1600s.
Yeah, 15 something. There was an 80 years war, wasn't there? 80 years of the Dutch pirate state. And obviously they rebelled against the Spanish. And, obviously, the story is, so you got Ferdinand and Isabella, they kicked the Jews out of Spain. A lot of them go to the Netherlands because it's part of the Spanish Empire at that time. And then, of course, you have the Reformation. A lot of Protestants turn up. And then these guys are like, hey, let's have a revolution, right? And they did. And they flooded all the fields so the army couldn't get in. And they basically transformed themselves into a pirate state. And they were, amazingly enough, such a tiny country, they became like the dominant naval power for some time. But that was the first time that the tree colors were flown. So it is a real, genuine Republican flag. So there you go.
Yeah, no, I can well believe that. I know the old South African flag, not that horrible Y-fronts thing they have today, but the old one they had when the white government was in charge. That was based on the Dutch East India Company flag.
Yeah.
But in the middle, it had the Union Jack and also the flags of the Orange Free State and the South African Republic, what everyone calls the Transvaal.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, people say, it's a cyberpunk conspiracy or whatever, that the corporations are going to take over the world. And it's like, well, hang on, this has already happened. I mean, look at the Dutch East India Company. That wasn't an imperial thing. That was a corporation. That was quite literally a corporation with an army and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I don't know how much that one was, but the British one, for example, actually didn't really stay a private company for very long. Like by the time of the Indian Mutiny, which overthrew it eventually, it really wasn't a private company. It was pretty much controlled by the British government. Yeah,
I mean, it transformed into that, but it started off as a corporation.
Oh yeah, for sure. Originally, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, corporations do rule the world. There you go.
I don't think they should. I think like modern corporate globalism is like an entirely evil system. It's just a bad system for everybody.
Yeah. What do you think? What do you think about them anyway? I've always been very anti-corporate, basically, ever since I watched that. What the hell was that video called? The Four Horsemen. Do you remember that? It's like a lefty kind of anti-corporate documentary or whatever.
I just think that there's a limit to how big corporations should be allowed to get, and like the really, really huge multinational corporations are a bad thing. Organizations like Google, for example, or some of the very, very big drug companies, one or two of the very big oil companies. Some of these places are quite a lot of huge armament manufacturers and so on. I'm not really in favor of those guys, and also, of course, the particularly the enormous multinational banks these days. So I'm not a fan. Oh, by the way, Bruce, in case you haven't heard, apparently a deal has been struck on Brexit.
Yeah, I haven't.
On Christmas Eve, what a surprise! Eh?
Right, I don't know anything about it. I mean, tell me. I don't know.
No, I don't know anything about it, man. I just saw the headline. I haven't had a chance to look at it at all. But if Boris's recent stuff has anything to go by, it'll be a sellout largely. Honestly, that guy is like he's totally dishonest, and he is he's a social liberal globalist, and he's in no sense a real conservative at all.
No. I mean,
look at his father. His father started off working for the World Bank, and then worked for the European Commission.
Oh, his father did, really? I didn't know
that. That is Alexander Boris Johnson's father. He worked for the World Bank to start with, and then for the European Commission. They were his two big jobs.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, aren't we, with these bloody Tories? Because I don't know what you're going to do.
We've got to stop voting for them. We've got to stop voting for them, and for Labour.
Well, who are you going to vote for? UKIP?
UKIP, Nigel Farage's party. For Britain, I'd say anyone apart from the Conservatives, the Labour Party, and the Lib Dems, and the Greens, obviously. We can't vote for any of those guys. We've got to basically go for more or less nationalist, patriotic, populist parties. And I don't think, hopefully they can get some sort of alliance going is what they need to do. So that they don't fight each other's seats. Yeah, no, I grant you. Yeah, herding cats. Absolutely right.
Yeah, not going to happen, mate. I mean, right-wing politics is just a shit show. It just is. That is it. That's why
I'm kind of getting that. The more I've got into it, I am kind of getting that.
Yeah, it is amazing actually. When I first got involved, I was all bright and starry-eyed as well, and then it's like you see the shit show happen, and then first of all you think, oh, it's controlled opposition agents and they're stirring things up, which is also partly true. And then as time goes by, you start to realize actually it's just human nature, and there's just like a lot of like
there's a lot of personalities involved in it. I think there's a lot of petty rivalry that people come up with. I don't think it's a healthy, good thing at all. I mean, okay, I do think that it's reasonable to call out a group like PA because they try and hide the fact that they're basically Natsocks. And they also try and hide the fact that they have pedophiles in their ranks and this kind of stuff.
Pedogate.
I think that sort of thing. Yeah, it's perfectly okay to call that out.
I
don't call it out, the media sure will. So
I haven't been following the whole pedo story. I mean,
I haven't followed it in any great detail, but I've watched a couple of videos by people that were convincing enough for me to believe them.
Right. So we're talking about here. We're talking about Northern Nationalist. He did a video, didn't he?
Yeah, and I don't agree with his politics, but I like him as a bloke, and I believe he's an honest guy. So yeah. So
I don't know. I've never heard of what was he talking about? A DB, a BD? There's a background check.
You can do it. You have to pay for it, but you can do it.
Yeah, 25 quid.
Yeah.
So he's saying
anyone who's a convicted pedophile, as this person supposedly is, will be on the National Sex Offenders Register.
Yeah. So
it's quite easy to check.
Yeah. Yeah, 25 quid I think it costs.
Well, there you go. You would think with all that sweet super chat money coming in from the US that they could afford to do that, really.
How much does it cost to join the PA?
I've no idea. I've never looked at it, mate. I wouldn't dream of joining them if they were the last political party on earth. But
yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's never. Yeah, I mean, I sympathise with them a little bit because it's like grassroots organisation trying to build something. Somebody slips in through the gaps, so I do sympathise a little bit. But I
don't think they've got that many members. That's the thing.
Was the guy actually a member though? Was he actually a member? Was he
I don't know. Don't they say they don't have any members? They just have supporters. I don't know. There's all sorts.
It's like they organise some kind of event. They invite a bunch of random people. Some people turn up. One of them happens to be a pedo, and it's like, how are they supposed to know?
Yeah, I think the guy was also supposed to be living with a regional organizer or something like that. So it was a bit more complicated. But I don't really follow that much. I've kind of said what I've wanted to say about PA, and I don't tend to discuss them that much these days.
Yeah,
I think they're pretty irrelevant. They're never going to get anywhere because even if they did start to get some traction, which they certainly haven't now, they would get destroyed the first time the media got hold of any stories about them. which I'm sure they have in reserve if they ever need them.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's better to criticize them for ideology instead of things like this. That's my feeling.
Oh yeah,
I know everybody thinks I'm a gossip merchant, and it is fun to talk about this stuff. But I mean, fundamentally, my disagreement with them is ideological. That's it, and it's probably best to concentrate on that, because otherwise, there's always just so much shit getting thrown around. And
yeah, I think sometimes people can go overboard with that stuff. Like, I've not really got into a lot of the stuff that's been attacking like certain individuals for one thing or another. I just think that if you actually have a convicted pedophile, that's kind of the sort of thing that no nationalist organization can afford to have at all.
Yeah,
it's just because rightly virtually everyone regards that as just about the lowest of the low things you can do.
Yeah. Have they kicked him out?
I have no idea, but I would expect so.
Yeah, they must have done. Yeah. No,
I haven't really followed it. I've watched a couple of videos on it, it was just yet another disaster. But then I just think that everything Mark Collect touches is a disaster, pretty much.
It must be really hard to run an organization. I mean, it's hard enough running a Telegram group. Can you imagine running a political party? My God.
Well, I wouldn't even run a Telegram group because I'm not on Telegram, but I've had people tell me about it, and it just sounds a total shit show. So I don't think I'd even want to do that.
Yeah.
Like I've got a Discord which has literally got about 6 people in it. So
yeah.
And they're people I know because otherwise they're not in the Discord.
Yeah, it's a nightmare. You've got to heavily moderate it, and you always get somebody like, "Oh, I'm going to quit your group because you let this person join," and it's like, "Fucking hell, oh my God, drama." Yeah, it's just it's like herding
a little
cat.
group of people who I like,
yeah,
and who I'm happy to stream with. That's all I've got in my Discord. And I've said to people, "Look, if you want other people in the Discord, you let me know, and we'll have a look at them." But I certainly wouldn't I wouldn't want it to be a public Discord where anyone could join, because I think that would be a nightmare.
Yeah, I sometimes think it's just better to do your own thing. I was talking to Unwashed about this, and he was just like, I mean, he just does his own thing, and he's quite successful. He doesn't have a gang. As soon as you start getting involved with gangs of people, groups of people, it's like, instead of thinking about the news and instead of thinking about philosophy, all of a sudden you're thinking about the gang and the people, and it's like you just get sucked into this whirlwind, So there you go.
I'd sooner we attacked our common enemies rather than each other. It just seems a waste of time and energy to attack each other.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand why it happens, and I understand sometimes when you get attacked, you feel like you have to retaliate, because I've certainly been in that kind of position. But by and large, I think it's a waste of our energy. Like, we are a small minority, and like the people who hold more or less the same position that you and I do are an even smaller minority. So at least in terms of people who are actually streaming. So I just don't see why, like, attacking each other. I just think it's giving the enemy ammunition, basically.
Yeah. It's also, I think you have to really be on top of it. Like, if you've got a group, you have to really, really be on. I mean, I've seen this is the way, like, for example, the Daily Storm operates, or TRS, they operate. I used to go on their forums, like, especially the TRS forum. It's like a little cult, and they will be in the forum, right, all the time, talking to people all the time, and or moderating the chat and monitoring it. And it's like managing a mob, and you have to put all your time and energy into managing that mob. And it can be a very powerful thing if you've managed to cultivate a certain mob of dedicated followers. You can channel that energy in certain directions, but your time is focused on that. Your time is not focused on thinking about stuff or reading books or anything of that kind of nature.
Yeah, I can believe that. I mean, I just say I'm going to do my own thing. Like, even the people in my Discord, like, I don't agree with all of the things that anyone in my Discord says.
Yeah.
There's no one in my Discord that I totally agree. I mean, I probably mostly agree with Adamant, for example, but I don't totally agree with Adamant. And I don't think you need to, because no two grown-up men are going to agree with each other totally about everything. That's just never going to happen. You've just got to have a broad area of agreement, in my opinion.
Yeah. What do you think about gold? Do you think gold's real money? Are you gold-pilled?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think eventually that this modern monetary theory of just printing money is going to come mightily unstuck. But I think the people who are going to come unstuck are the people who've got savings.
Yeah.
Reasonable savings. Speaking as a poor former soldier, that does not include me. So but right. Absolutely. I think money should be based on something of real value.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, because Sojourner and Ataman, they feel the same way. You see, and I think, like, once you've taken the gold pill, once you've realized that everything has a different perspective, and all this talk of socialism, it collapses completely, and you can see through it. So I think it's really, really essential that people understand that. Yeah.
I'm in no sense a socialist. I never was a socialist. Like, I joined the British Army at 18, and I'd been army-barmy for years before that. So, I was always at least a conservative.
Yeah.
These days, I describe myself as a reactionary traditionalist.
Right.
And that's as far as I'm willing to describe myself these days. I'm certainly not I'm not a conservative in the modern British Conservative Party sense. Those guys are way to the left of me. But equally, I'm not an Herzog. So, and I'm not, as some people will say, the dreaded CivNat. I'm certainly not CivNat either.
Yeah.
But I'm also not totally an FNat. Like, I'm not one of these people that thinks you've got to, like, kick everyone out of Britain.
Oh, God, why not?
I don't think it's possible. And B, by saying that you're thinking about doing that, you're going to ruin your electoral chances.
Right. So what you're saying is you'd like to, but you don't think it's possible.
If I thought it could be done practically and humanely, yes, I probably would support it, but I don't.
There you go. Okay, you are an ethno-nat then.
Not quite. Not. I could happily live. I could happily live in a country that was like 10% people of other races.
Oh God. Yeah. All right.
I don't think that would be enough to like really badly affect the country, to be honest with you.
I know how you really feel about the subject matter. Really, you'd like to kick them out. You just.
If I thought you could do it humanely and realistically, then I would probably support that. But I don't think you can do those things, so I don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I would certainly like to. I think we've got to stop all mass third-world immigration, basically. I think we've got to kick out all the illegal immigrants. I think we've got to kick out any immigrant who commits a serious crime within, say, the first 5 or 7 years that they're in the country. I think you've got to make sure that people get no sort of welfare benefits for at least the first 5 years they're in the country. And I am certainly in favor of offering generous financial incentives for immigrants and the children of immigrants to go home. And I'd make them very generous. I'd give people like 50,000 quid to do so per person. I'd do all those things for sure.
Yeah. You're like most CivNats. They all say the same thing. All of these Sargon followers.
I'm not a CivNat, mate. I don't regard myself as a CivNat at all.
Wow.
I think Britain belongs to the British people, and the British people are white and Anglo-Celtic.
Okay. Yeah, but I mean, anyway, all the Sargon followers, they all say the same thing. They're like, yeah, it would be good, but I don't think it's possible.
Yeah, I can't stand Sargon. I really have no time for him at all. But I'm nothing like Sargon. No, not at all.
Yeah, no, I don't mean Sargon himself, but his followers. That's what I mean.
I don't have much time for Sargon's followers because, like, I think Sargon would make a good deputy manager of a second-hand vacuum cleaner store. So I'm not sure why anyone follows him. Seriously, I've thought that for a long time. He's a midwit.
Yeah. No, he is kind of dumb.
I mean, who calls their channel the Lotus Eaters, for God's sake?
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
He's got a nice voice, though. He's got a sonorous voice.
If you
that's
like,
what it is.
kind of lower middle class accent, I guess. I don't know. I mean, he really got on my nerves when he was claiming to be like 20% black or something, because he had a grandfather from, what was it? Was it not St. Helena, the other place in the South Atlantic?
I don't know.
There's some British islands in the South Atlantic. There's St. Helena and a couple of others. I can't remember the name of it now. But we had a guy in my battalion in the army who came from there, and he was not black. You know, like I
think he actually does.
He looked like an Italian, I would say, as the closest I'd go.
I know a guy that's been around his house, and he's seen the family pictures, and his grandfather is black.
Black.
It's, well, I don't know, like blackish, brownish. I don't know how black.
I mean, years, that stuff must have died out very quickly, because I've seen photographs of his father, certainly, who's not, and mother, who are not in the least black. So, you know.
Yeah.
And the people of these islands are actually a mixture of British people, of people from kind of like the Malaya area. Yeah. And also some Africans. But they're a mixture of all those people. So the idea that he was 10% black was absolute nonsense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know.
But as I say, I don't think he's a great intellect. Like, if you ever hear him do a talk with someone who knows something about their subject, like he was talking with Charlemagne and somebody else about this bloody NRX stuff.
Right.
And he just hadn't bothered reading anything about it at all. Even though they did this series over about a month, and he didn't read anything about it from start to finish.
Oh, right. He just waffled.
Yeah, which is generally what he does, and why he loses every debate he ever gets into.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm always backed into a corner where I find myself defending Sargon. It's very strange, but I mean, anyway, whatever. I mean, he is what he is, and
I suppose you could say he's a gateway drug. He's kind of a gateway person that he introduces people to this kind of sphere.
I respect him because he talked to Millennial Woes, and he talked to Andrew Anglin, and he even defended the Stormer when he got kicked off the internet. So he does genuinely believe in free speech, and he is willing to talk to people, unlike somebody like, I don't know, Jordan Peterson, who, when asked about the Jewish question, just said, "I can't talk about that."
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Or
I watched that.
Stefan Molyneux, who calls himself, the biggest philosophy channel on the internet, but he will never ever dream of talking to the alt-right. So I mean, at least Sargon talks to people, right?
And he still got chucked off of YouTube.
He's on YouTube. Oh, Stefan Molyneux. Yeah.
He still got chucked off YouTube. So
So I respect him for that, and it just seems to me that there's this. Again, I don't know if it's bad actors or just like the nature of people that are involved in the dissident right or the alt right, but they just like it's like they just thrive on attacking Sargon, and it's like, dude, he's like the only guy that spoke to us, and you're just hurling abuse at him.
I just don't talk about him much.
No, I know, but I mean, I'm just saying that the reaction, like sending him photographs of dead babies and stuff when his wife's had a miscarriage. I mean, it's like, what the fuck? Like, this is like the only guy that actually talked to us, and everyone's just like,
don't forget, Bruce. He was also sending alt-right guys pictures of interracial gay porn.
Right. Okay.
He's often his own worst enemy,
Yeah.
Like he didn't need to make the alt-right his enemy. He did that on purpose because at the time he was trying to do his ridiculous liberalist nonsense.
Yeah.
So I like I say, I'm not. I can't stand people like Richard Spencer. I think Richard Spencer's either a fed or an idiot, or maybe both. I've no room for Natox at all. They're not. I don't think they're right for Britain at all. I don't think. I mean, if they want to go ahead and try and do stuff in Germany, good luck to them. But I don't think they have any relation to what is happening in Britain, and I don't think they have any appeal to most British average people.
The thing that gets me, if we want our thing to grow, the people that are going to appeal to most are Sargon's followers. And so if we're hurling abuse at Sargon, then it's going to turn those people away.
Yeah, that's possible. It is possible.
That's the thing.
Yeah, no, it is possible. As I say, I'm not a big fan of Sargon. I haven't watched him at all for I don't know, probably 5 years. Because I just find his takes not very enlightening. But he's got loads and loads of subs, so obviously he's doing something right.
I don't know. Maybe it's just me. I mean, it's like for me, the enemy's always been the alt-right.
Yeah, well, there's that.
You know what I mean? So it's like I've got all my time and energy just fighting with these idiots. And Sargon, I guess Sargon is just like, maybe if I was like famous, and then I'd want to pick a fight with Sargon. But right now it's just like, I don't know. He's not even on the radar. Do you know what I mean?
I don't tend to talk about Sargon. The only time I've got slagged off talking about Sargon was in the chat on an AA stream, when Sargon came on the stream and then sat there for like half the stream talking bullshit about virtually every subject that came up. So, and I got a bit annoyed about that, and someone said I had a hate boner for him, which maybe I do. So I don't know, but I don't generally talk about him at all, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So I'm certainly don't want to pick a fight with him. He's got a vastly bigger audience than me, but I'm not. I mean, you're right. Yes, I mean, because I don't think he's our enemy. Put it that way.
Yeah.
Like he would go quite a long way along the kind of road that we want to go on. So yeah, fair enough.
Anyway, at least he talks to us. I mean, Katie Hopkins won't talk to us, will he? Peter Hitchens won't talk to us.
Peter Hitchens won't talk to most people, so that's he won't talk to most people, to be honest with you.
James Delingpole, would he talk to us? Ooh,
actually. James Delingpole is actually has come quite a long way over the last year.
Yeah,
I think the scales have been a bit removed from his eyes because of all these lockdowns and so on.
Yeah,
so James Delingpole, possibly.
Yeah, I like James. I like him.
Yeah, I don't mind him at all. The only two mainstream journalists I got any time for at all are Delingpole and Hitchens.
Yeah. I don't really follow it at all. Yeah, I mean, there's that. How was that guy called? Rod Little, I think. Maybe I've got some time for him. I don't know. Apparently he was
British or American.
Daily Mail. I think it's Rod. Somebody in the chat remind me. Rod.
Because I don't read newspapers these days. I occasionally look at stuff they write online, but I certainly don't buy one.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. He's a member of the Social Democratic Party.
Oh, I know the chap you're talking about. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure look, immigration is a time bomb. I'm pretty sure this is the guy that got caught. Yeah, he's pretty conservative. I'm pretty sure
he's a former Labour supporter, isn't he?
I'm pretty sure he supports Millwall, and he got done for but yeah, apparently they've got like a Millwall. Yeah, Rod Liddell. Yeah. They've got like a Millwall forum, and he's got some kind of, basically he'll be on this forum anonymously talking about, the C word and the N word and the P word and so on and so forth. Because you know what Millwall's like, they're there you go. It's called BNP statements on a message board under So I think he's our guy. But as I say, I've never really read his stuff. I mean, and he's a socialist anyway. But I mean, I think.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was on. That. What you're saying is show, wasn't he? last year, or maybe the year before even.
And what show? Sorry.
What you're saying is,
I don't know.
Yeah, it's not bad actually. They have people like him on, and Hitchens and Dellingpole and people like that.
Oh, is that BBC? Is it?
No, it's a YouTube thing.
No, I don't know.
No, it's a YouTube thing. I certainly wouldn't. I don't watch anything on the BBC. The Quiet Brainwashing Corporation. No. But yeah, Rod Little. He could be another bloke that. The English Democrats would certainly be a better bet for people to vote for, rather than the Conservatives, Labour, or the Lib Dems. That's for sure.
No, he's in the Social Democratic Party. SDP, founded in 1990. Basically, Eurosceptic. Basically, it's like Blue Labour.
Yeah.
It's National Socialism, basically.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I remember you.
I'll read the article. The Social Democratic Party, centrist political party in the United Kingdom, established in 1990. Traces its roots to the Social Democratic Party, which was formed in 1981 by a group of dissident Labour Party members of Parliament and former MPs Roy Jenkins, David Owen, Bill Rogers, Shirley Williams, who became known as the Gang of Four. And so there you go. They've been around for a long time. Never really achieved anything. I don't really know much about them. But there you go.
I remember when we were talking, like probably 6 months ago,
right,
about looking at British nationalist parties.
Yeah.
So I started making a list, and I got to about 15 and just gave up. It was like there were just so many, and they were all so small, or nearly all so small.
Oh, that would be a good show. We should do that as a show.
Yeah,
just
I've been thinking about it.
List.
We could, and like the amalgamations and the ones that have disappeared and the arguments that they have between each other. It's just like, it's pathetic, basically. What we need is somebody, and I think at this stage it's got to be Nigel Farage, because he's the only guy who's big enough to do it, to actually head some sort of alliance is the only chance we have.
Yeah.
The other people can get in on so that they don't fight in each other's seats and take each other's votes, because they're all going after the same vote, pretty much. I
don't really trust Farage, though. I don't trust him.
I don't totally trust Farage either, but I think he's the best we've got. Yeah. He's the only guy who has the political clout that could actually get MPs elected into Parliament. And he's untouchable by the mainstream media. He's done nothing that they can destroy him with.
Well, they would have destroyed him a long time ago if they could have done, wouldn't they?
Yes, exactly. I think he's a bit more red-pilled than he lets on. I think he's quite careful what he says for precisely that reason.
Yeah. Well, what happened to his Brexit party? What's that doing now?
Well, he's changing the name to like the British Reform Party or something like that. I can't remember what it is exactly. Right. But what I think needs to happen is he needs to do some sort of deal with at least for Britain and maybe UKIP, even if those three could do a deal. Yeah. And they all started off in the same bloody party, so it shouldn't be that impossible. And just so they don't run against each other, and I think that might be the best deal. And then, like, everybody who is against immigration, mass immigration, and who is not socially liberal would at least have someone they could switch their vote to that wasn't Labour or the Tories or the bloody Lib Dems or the Greens. Yeah,
I'm just looking at it now. I mean, if he does it, he does it. I don't know. I mean, at least Farage is smart enough to go on YouTube. I mean, this is what I've been talking about for such a flipping long time. It's like these parties, why don't they make YouTube videos? It amazes me. It's like the mass media is not going to give you any attention. Like, just start a YouTube channel, you morons. Like, what is wrong with you? It's the 21st century, for Christ's sake. Like, do I really have to explain this to people? But there's so many of these small parties out there, and they concentrate on like knocking on people's doors and delivering leaflets and things like that. And it's like, okay, I mean, it's not bad, but you could get much more of an audience just online, sitting in the comfort of your own home.
But you do get an audience. I'm not sure how much you get people to actually go out and vote,
Well, you get an audience, and then you can get members, and then people pay you a membership fee, and then you got money coming in, and then you can get stuff done, So
yeah, maybe so. I mean, look, as I say, I just think there are too many small parties in the UK, and it would be much better if there were only one or two or three, and they were in an alliance.
Yeah.
I just think that is the only chance we have of winning politically, because the Conservative Party are a dead loss. And the other thing you got to look at is if there was a realistic populist, in inverted commas, nationalist party that started to get MPs, you might even get some Conservatives who would leave the Conservative Party and join them, like some of the more right-wing Conservatives.
Oh, we already saw that with UKIP, didn't we?
Well, we did get one or two, yeah, absolutely, and I think that would happen more if the party was like looking to be more healthy, if you see what I mean. Yeah, start to pick up votes. You've got to have something which, like, your average Conservative voters in the shires, and your basically socially conservative working class voters in the north can both support.
Dino in the chat says, Lawrence Fox did those YouTube videos, did he? Oh, right. YouTube videos, and nobody watches them. Yeah, he did. But I think he'll get there eventually. He's just, give him some time. If he keeps making them.
Yeah. And again, we actually talked about this on a stream. Like, I think it was me and Sojo adamant that I've got nothing against Lawrence Fox. He's not disagreeing with most of the things we want. He doesn't go as far as we would like to go, nowhere near. But he's certainly not one of our enemies. So I'm not going to slag him off. I don't slag anyone off on the right unless they are leading people down a cul-de-sac like the Nationalists do.
Yeah. I mean, it's frustrating for me because it's so obvious what you need to do. You just need to copy what Joe Rogan does, right? The internet's most popular flipping podcast, right? One of the internet's most popular media figures. And what does he do? He just talks to people, right? So if you want power, all you got to do, have a show, invite people on your show, talk to them. You'll get the views, you'll get the subscribers, and people will listen to you, and people will respect you. If Lawrence Fox did that, if any of these people did that, they'd be big and they could unite people. But for some reason, it's not happening. There you go.
I think that's the kind of stuff that we should be doing, and that's another reason why I don't think we should go on about the JQ, because if we do, a lot of those people just won't come on.
Oh, wow. No need to, whatever. But I mean, maybe Unwashed, he's doing some good work, putting in a lot of hard work, talking to people.
I don't watch Unwashed very often because he banned me in his chat a lot. Like when he hadn't been going very long and he was a full-on PA supporter. I said something in his chat he didn't like and he banned me. So, but apparently he's not banned me that now, I hear. So, but
I wouldn't take that. I wouldn't take that too badly. I ban people in the chat all the time if they're just being stupid.
I've only got 2 people that are banned in my chat, and that was because they were swearing and coming out with like pretty nasty shit. So I banned them. But I'm not a free speech absolutist, but I am generally in favour of free speech as far as you can be. But
me too. But I mean, sometimes you get people. Sometimes you get.
Sorry,
go on.
If we want to get big people on, I think we've got to avoid going into areas which we know damn well will stop a lot of those people from talking to us.
No, well, yeah. I mean, I can't change who I am, So there you go.
Oh, listen, you obviously, you must do what you must do, but that's what I look at from my channel's point of view. I'm quite happy to talk about the JQ. But I'm not going to go on that I think it's our biggest problem or anything like our biggest problem, because I just think, A, that's not true, and B, it will mean that loads of people who I'd like to talk to won't talk to me.
Well, I've been saying this. I don't think I've said it to you, but I've been chatting to somebody about it. But I mean, you got an opportunity, but you could really do some good because you're ex-military and you're a boomer, and you got time on your hands.
I'm really a boomer, by the way. I'm a little bit too young to be called a boomer, to be honest.
What, are you in your 50s?
I'm 55. You got to be 60 to be a boomer, mate.
Oh well, you're a boomer.
So I'm not
mate, have you got grey hair? Have you got grey hair? Have you got grey hair? Have you got grey hair?
I haven't had any hair since I was 28. I've shaved my head since I was 28.
Fair enough.
I've usually got a goatee beard, but I've actually got a big one at the moment because it's a lockdown beard still.
Oh, fair
Although
enough.
I will be getting rid of it in the new year because I'm moving in the new year.
Fair enough. But yeah, I mean, as I say, like, but you're retired though, aren't you?
Semi. I still do some work in terms of military history stuff and stuff like that.
Okay.
And I still do a bit of writing and stuff like that, you know.
Okay.
I'm not totally retired, but semi-retired.
Anyway, the point I'm driving at is like, you know, bring in the boomers. You know, they've got time on their hands. They're well read, mostly. Most of them have had families and children, so they're not just like spurgy and filled with hatred against women or whatever. And yeah, they've got experience, you know, dealing with people and so on and so forth. And so yeah, get these people on the internet. Do you know what I mean? Like these are the people that should be leading this thing, not young men. Like, well, not young, but not young men. You know, young men can do something, but it should be the older generation that's really leading the way. But unfortunately, old people don't know how to use the internet, and so they're not on the internet. And so there's this massive generational divide, and it's a big problem for us. And I was saying this even before the Bulldog nationalism kicked off. I mean, you know, you got all these old members of the National Front, the BNP. Like, what are these people doing? Like, why aren't they talking to people and helping people? You know, they're just like, what are they, hanging out on Stormfront or whatever and just talking to each other. And so because they're not taking a position of leadership, you get people like Mark Collett leading instead, right? Whereas he doesn't really have the experience. You know, so there's a massive generational divide, and it needs to be bridged.
Yeah, I certainly think we could do with more fathers.
Yeah.
Yeah, more fathers for sure. I mean, I'm pretty red-pilled on women, to be honest with you. Like, because I'm like you. I partly came into this sphere via kind of the manosphere.
Yeah.
And I am pretty red-pilled on women. Like, I don't expect women to do things that they're not going to do, you know. And I don't expect them to be these golden-haired angels that some people in the nationalist circle seem to think that they are, especially after like 50 years of being posed by bloody feminism, you know. So I'm not like that, but I do definitely think that nationalism could do with more mature blokes who've had kids and this kind of stuff, for sure. Yeah,
it's better, because otherwise you know, it's like what Tommy Robinson said. He said, look, none of these people have babies. And it's like, well, yeah, you got a point, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, I don't think that that's necessarily the be all and end all. I mean, as you say, there are certainly lots of things that single guys can do. But I do think that if someone's had a family, and like run a household and so on, it does give them a certain level of maturity, or should do at least. And do with more people like that, you know.
It brings you down to earth a little bit, doesn't it?
Better advice to younger guys as well.
Well, so I think it's just a case of I think that you become the person that you think about a lot. I think role models are really important, and so if you're
especially boys, yeah, absolutely.
If you're constantly thinking about somebody like, I don't know, Andrew Anglin, you're going to end up like Andrew Anglin, right? Just angry, spurgy, single white man who hates women and never going to have a family, you know. And Whereas on the other hand, if you think about somebody like Varg Vikernes, who, although I'm not, I don't agree with his opinions, it's like at least he's got like how many kids? 5, 6 kids, So it's like it's a good. You'll end up like Varg, basically. So you become the person that you think about a lot, and so people need role models,
Yeah. No, I do agree. I'm like, I don't regard myself as a particularly good role model because, like, I spent my time doing this, that, and the other. But I've probably had a reasonable amount of life experience, at least. And my son's turned out pretty good as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, we do need to encourage more guys who've had families and this kind of stuff for sure. And I'm not at all against having older people on streams. I got very pissed off at one stage in like probably 2018 when like every nationalist stream you went on was like vicious hatred against boomers, basically. And sure, there are bad boomers, but there are good boomers as well,
Yeah. Well,
they didn't all set out to ruin the West, which is the impression you sometimes get if you listen to these young keyboard warriors in their mum's basement,
Yeah. Well, yeah, but something has to be said, though. I mean, they kind of are the worst. I mean, all of this has happened under their leadership. So
yeah, look, I don't disagree with that, but to say that it's under their leadership, I mean, we can rightly, in my opinion, slag off Alexander Boris Johnson, but like him being in power has got nothing to do with you and I,
Yeah.
So I'm sure that for a lot of the times, like I knew, for example, I've known a lot of British soldiers in my time, and also Australian and South African soldiers and Canadians, for that matter. And they were doing their best, They were often literally fighting communism.
Yeah.
So you can't blame them.
Yeah, I mean, there's always, but I mean, people have to express how they feel. But as you say, I mean, people aren't, the boomers aren't the enemy. It's the oligarchs. But I mean, anyway, what
Fiverr is saying in the chat, you need to turn Jeff Taylor. Now, Jeff Taylor would be a case in point. Jeff Taylor is a Royal Navy veteran, and he fought in the Falklands War.
Jeff Taylor, I'm looking him up.
He's the bloke who does all the Brexit videos.
I don't know.
And it's he does all the Brexit videos. He keeps up with
that guy with the huge head
and the moustache, yes. But he's a Royal Navy veteran who fought in the Falklands War.
Right.
So you can't slag him off. He was doing his best,
Yeah, he's like proper gammon, and he's just like a giant rock, like a huge.
Yeah, he's a pretty solid looking chap.
Yeah.
But I quite like his Brexit coverage. I think he occasionally wobbles into it being a bit too weak on the Conservative Party, but generally he's pretty good.
Yeah, Jeff Taylor. Yeah. Well, as I say, I mean, these are the kind of people that a proper English ethno-nationalism could appeal to. They're not going to talk to Mark Collett, but they talk to something like that, definitely. But yeah, I mean, look, this is the thing. Like, I mean, this is why I like you, is because you're a veteran, right? And people who are ex-military, they're never going to go in for the Nazi bullshit. And so if we could get like a group of ex-military guys like yourself, and as you said, I mean, they're vets are already interconnected. I mean, they all know each other, or they've got like forums online and family connections and what have you. It's already a community within itself.
You've got to be careful with that, though, Brutus. I tell you, because, like, for example, ARS, which is the British Army Rumour Forum, which I used to use and haven't used.
Hang on, what's it called? ARS.
ARS, yeah. Yeah, it's the British Army Rumour Forum, and it's kind of a British Army, but also general British Armed Forces forum. And I stopped using it years ago because it was so heavily infiltrated with corporate globalism and bloody social liberalism, and really badly so. It's to the extent that you would get banned if you said something that was pretty traditional nationalist. So I just stopped using it. So you have to be quite careful in that regard.
Well, yeah, but the question is, why are they doing it? They're targeting that because they see it as a source of power, and they got to control it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
They realize the threat. Now, people like Mark Collett are never, ever in a million years going to appeal to the armed forces because they hate the British Army and they hate the British Empire and so on and so forth.
Especially the RAF.
Yeah. Yeah, they do. But if we could have, a nationalism which is kind of led by like veterans and so on and so forth, or at least led in part by veterans and so on and so forth, you could get those people on our side, and you'd never fall for all the Nazi bullshit. And if anybody came along and they said, "Oh, you're a Nazi," then you could say, "No, I'm a veteran, ex-military," and you could really like push that garbage out. Yep. And so I think that's the way forward.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I mean, one of the things I want to do, and I'm just starting to get a little bit of a fingernail up on it, is I want to start doing streams with people from Australia and New Zealand and Canada, and also South Africa. And I've got an Australian guy who wants to do a stream with me in the new year, who I like, who's a guy called the Franklin.
Right.
So that's one of the things I want to do is I want to start getting some British Commonwealth streams going.
Well, you could get Throttlegrim on. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but one of my co-hosts used to be a guy called Throttlegrim, and he was an Aussie bloke. Cool. And he'd come on the show every Sunday. He came on the show for like a year and a half.
Cool. I'd certainly be interested in talking to him for sure.
Oh, you remember him, do you?
I vaguely do. I didn't watch you all the time back then. I did occasionally.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, I'd be happy to talk to him for sure.
Yeah, he was a great guy. He dropped out though. He dropped out because security problems. He's into Linux and encryption and security and this kind of thing. And he didn't want to go on Twitter. He didn't want to go on Telegram. And I think he was using some kind of VPN. Yeah. And it was interfering with StreamYard. And I kept having him on the show and it kept crashing again and again. And like and I was like, dude, you got to turn off your VPN. And he didn't want to do it. And it just got frustrating. And in the end, he quit. So, yeah.
I find the problem, like I watch a fair number of Australian nationalist YouTubers, and the problem you've got a lot of nat socks, and you've got a lot of guys who are deliberately anti-intellectual, and I don't mean that in the sense of they're working class. I mean they don't really want to talk about ideas,
right?
And I think you have to talk about ideas. That certainly at this early stage of doing stuff, you've got to. Because you got to kind of hammer out what you agree on, what you don't agree on, and kick things around a bit,
Yeah.
So that's a bit difficult. Another group I thought that looked quite promising for you or I to talk to was the Traditional Britain group. You know those guys?
Oh yeah, they're good.
They look like a good group that we could certainly talk to because they basically seem to have. What I've seen, there's nothing that they say that I don't really agree with, to be honest with you.
Yeah, they definitely talk to you. I don't know about me, but they talk to you.
But yeah, that's another group that I think would be worth talking to. I'd like at some stage to do. I'd like to do a stream with Don the Pleb from America because I like him. He's an ex-US Marine Corps guy.
Oh right, okay.
And he's on the right, but certainly not the alt-right or anything like that. So I wouldn't mind doing a stream with that guy, and like I talk to him in his chat quite often. Yeah, Plebeian Media is his YouTube channel. His channel blew up when he went to that last Washington DC protest, and he was going around. He was going around with all the Proud Boys who were trying to protect people from the Antifa scum.
Plebeian Media, okay.
Yeah, he's pretty good, Don the Pleb. He'd talk to you for sure. I'm quite sure.
Oh, would he really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he would. Yeah, and he's on Twitter and stuff, so it's quite easy to get hold of him. He's got all his links and stuff are under his channel.
Where is he? Is he an ethno?
No, I don't know if he's an FNAP, but he's on the right, and he's at the moment he's full on supporting Trump for trying to not give up to Biden.
Yeah.
And he talks quite like he's one of these guys that says, look, it could happen that the US might end up in some sort of in Minecraft civil war, in Minecraft.
Yeah. In Minecraft.
But yeah. Listen, Alphabet Taxonon ZCAT. I did mention earlier that there's been a Brexit deal. Neither of us have had a chance yet to look at it, so we can't really talk about it yet. I don't know whether you still want to do a stream on Boxing Day, Brutus, do you?
Yeah, we could do, yeah.
Or maybe if we do a stream on Boxing Day, we could talk about the Brexit deal, because we might get a chance to look at it. Although, bear in mind, guys, it's Christmas Day already here, and it's almost Christmas Day for Brutus, or not too much longer in the future. So we could have a look at that maybe for Boxing Day, or maybe a stream in the New Year sometime.
We'll do. I got to keep my mum company for Christmas.
Yeah,
so.
exactly. Yeah, like I've got to wait for my son to send me a Skype call at some stage today.
Yeah,
which he generally does at a ridiculous time because he doesn't bother looking up the time, which is strange for someone who is an officer in the Royal Navy. But there we go.
Yeah, what was I going to say? I was going to excuse me. I was going to say something. I've forgotten. Yeah, hang on, I'm choking. Hang on.
Alphabet Taxonon ZCAT. What have we been talking about? Well, we've really been talking about the state of British nationalism at the moment, how we might be able to help it change direction a bit, this kind of stuff, that sort of thing, really. Also, that the sort of guys we'd like to get joining supporting nationalism. So we'd like more guys who've like had kids and stuff like that, who've a bit more life experience and so on, that sort of stuff. No, I don't think he's dead. I think he's just getting himself a drink of water or something like that. I hope he's not dead. He was eating, so I'm presuming something went down the wrong hole, as they say. But yeah, I don't know. I think that we do have to make more allies. The absolute state of white nationalism. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a white nationalist. I'm a British nationalist. I wish every good to white guys in America and to white guys in Germany and Denmark and Norway and France, and obviously to all of the European countries. But I'm basically a British, or if you like, British and British Commonwealth nationalist in the sense of the old Commonwealth, which, as I said earlier in the stream, is the old Commonwealth was Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and back in the day, it used to include South Africa.
You're right. Sorry, I was choking.
Yeah, no, people were speculating if you were dead or not, but happily or not.
Yeah. Sorry, it went down the wrong way. So there you go. Questions in the chat. Brutus is gay.
Well, that was a fine
comment.
Fine comment. Yeah, I must have spent some time thinking that one up.
No, I mean, to be fair, I've been talking to Thomas Batten, Thomas something Rice, and he's
yeah. I know the guy you're talking about.
Yeah, he's kind of sort of gay, but I bullied him and I told him you're not allowed to be gay anymore. So I've sorted that problem out.
Isn't he on Millennial Wosie's show tomorrow?
I think he's on tonight, isn't he?
Oh, it might be tonight. Yeah, okay. I get confused when the times of his shows. He's actually had some pretty good guests on this year, I have to say.
He's all right. I like him. I mean, the thing about the gays for me is like, I believe in freedom of speech. People can talk to whoever they want. I'm not against people talking to, I don't know, Greg Johnson or Millennial Woes or whatever. I mean, my question is, why are they central? That's the question. It's like Thomas Baden Rice. Yeah, that's it. Why are they central? It's like Claire Core, right? Claire Core is like a crazy YouTuber with like 900 subscribers. She's a Malaysian Muslim woman that lives in Britain, used to be associated with the BNP. So I don't mind talking to her, but because it's just fun. But she's not someone that's taken seriously, right? It's just like a bit of a joke, And if anybody insults her and calls her crazy Claire Core or whatever, you don't get ostracized from the movement for making fun of her. So I guess my feeling about Grinder Greg is that he should be more like Claire Core, like the object of ridicule. I'm not saying that people shouldn't be allowed to talk to him or that I think he says some things that are interesting, but it's just like, why circle the wagons to defend a homosexual, an American homosexual like that? Do you know what I mean?
It was in the Nazi uniforms. They attract these people,
Yeah.
Honestly, I think there might be some truth in that.
Well, yeah. I mean, Michael Jones talks about it. The gays and the Nazis. What was the one that Hitler executed? What was his name?
Oh, the leader of the brown shirts, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody in the chat remind us.
Yeah, go on. Someone will remember his name. I know the bloke you're talking about. He was the leader of the brown shirts.
Yeah, he was openly homosexual.
Yeah.
So, I mean...
And he was caught having some sort of gay orgy before they killed him, I believe.
Yeah, and everybody knew about it. It wasn't a secret. Yeah. Hitler knew. He tolerated it. I mean, there was also a gay...
Ernst Rom, that's the bloke.
Ernst Rom, yeah.
Thank you, Spiritual Mamza. Yep, that was the guy.
Such a great name, Spiritual Mamza.
But yeah, no, there were quite a lot of people of that ilk attracted to it. I mean, I don't think I would make homosexuality illegal, but I certainly don't think it should be encouraged. And
the thing is, unless it's illegal, how are you going to keep it out of the public arena?
Well, I suppose what you could do is you could make it illegal, but kind of like decriminalize it, if you see what I mean. So it's illegal, but unless you're doing it openly and in public, you're not going to get into any trouble for it.
Yeah, I think that was the Victorian understanding of it. It's like if you've got two men, they, I don't know, rent a hotel room together or whatever, and they're doing gay sex. It's like, well, who's going to prove it? Who's going to tell the police? How are you going to prove what these two people were doing alone in a room, right? Unless you've got a camera there and you're filming it. So I think the law was just there to protect young boys, to stop them being preyed upon by these people. Because as a group, they prey on young men, right? They want, because it's like a cult almost.
Yeah. I know Greg is a Grinder Greg guy is well known for trotting around the globe with very young guys.
Right. So it's almost like older men preying on young men. I mean, older men have got a bit of money, a bit of power, and they kind of suck people into this abusive cult. And it's like some kind of weird death cult or something. So I think it just needs to be shut down. So there you go.
Start of the slippery slope that has led us to the LGBTQ nonsense and the tragedy of these, in inverted commas, trans kids, which is basically just child abuse by
their
mothers for the most part. And also with some help from the governments. And that is increasingly leading us towards making pedophilia legal. That's what the left wants. They want to lower the age of consent for sure.
Yeah.
And I think most people agree that that's just evil. It shouldn't happen.
Well, I think that's ultimately the revolution is a sexual revolution at its core. That's what they're pushing, and that I think it's all about a descent into anarchy. Basically, it's some kind of like Kabbalistic desire to return to the Garden of Eden, where everybody's naked and there are no rules. That's what I think is at the core of this thing that we're experiencing. But I think people need to understand that the government does have a right to regulate sexual behavior, and in fact, I would say that's a foundational thing that the government has to do, because civilization is built on families, and family is regulated by the bond of marriage, like the social contract of marriage, and the government is supposed to uphold and support that social contract and to make it strong. So the government is supposed to prevent adultery, prevent people cheating, prevent sex outside of marriage. Basically, that is the key function of the government, and that's how a civilization maintains itself. So this kind of liberal idea that people have these days of it's my business, it's not, the government has got nothing to do with it, it's false, it's a mistake.
In an even worse situation than that, because you've got this totally hypocritical feminist leftist idea that on the one hand women are these wonderful strong women and don't need no man and all this kind of stuff, but on the other hand we equally get the idea that they have to be protected as if they're made of glass that's going to shatter, and also they're not really adults, because if you and a woman are drunk and you have sex and the woman changes her mind the next day, you're won't, which equally seems absolutely nonsensical to me. If the woman's adult, you understand, of course.
Yeah. I think a lot of it's just a backlash against the sexual revolution, which I think is abusive to women fundamentally, because you're just using women for sex instead of marrying them like you used to. And I don't think women are consciously pushing this feminist agenda as a reaction to that, but I think that is what's going on. It's like they're subconsciously they're just realizing, like, we're just getting used here, we're getting pumped and dumped by Chad. Maybe. And we're fed up with this bullshit. So yeah, I mean, a lot of people give a lot of heat to feminist sluts and so on and so forth, but really it's Chad's fault, because Chad don't want to settle down. Chad just wants to have his party when he's got the pick of the crop, but he doesn't want to pick one.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I've never had a great deal of problem getting women when I was much interested in them. But then I don't look like the back of the bus. I'm not fat and I'm 6'2", so I can understand that some guys might find that more difficult. But I don't know. I think most guys can improve themselves enough that it shouldn't really be that hard for them to get themselves a woman, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, that's not what I'm talking about. I was just saying that, like, when we had the sexual revolution in the 60s, and you so-called liberated women or men, what actually happens is the men are just using women for sex instead of marrying them. It's abusive, because the way I see it is that it's a man's duty to protect women, which means that a father should protect his daughter.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. If of course the daughter has a father that even lives at home these days.
Yeah. So it's like, this is like the most beautiful thing that our civilization creates. It's the most valuable thing. A young, white, virgin girl, right? That's what everybody wants. Everybody wants a beautiful woman. That is the most beautiful woman. And what are we doing as a civilization? We're throwing this on the trash heap. And thus our civilization is being destroyed. If you cannot protect the chastity and the virginity of young maidens, that's it. It's over, dude. It's over. You're going to get
have you seen some of the behaviors of the young maidens in inverted commas? Like,
I agree.
This kind of stuff. It's not exactly chaste.
No, I know. I absolutely. But I mean, why are they behaving like that? They're behaving like that because they're allowed to behave like that. They shouldn't be allowed to behave like that, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I just think we've got a long way to go to do anything about that, you know.
Well, shut it down, get married. That's it.
Yeah, but I mean, you're not going to just say, well, yeah, that's what we're going to do and do it. You would have to take steps in that general direction, you know.
Well, you could start a trend, right?
Yeah,
you could start a trend. I mean, the manosphere is a trend. That's had a huge effect on the way men would deal with women, and so on and so forth. I mean, you could start a trend of marrying young. You could propagandize to women and say to them, listen, instead of going to university and getting yourself £30,000, £40,000 in debt, how about you just marry an older man, like in his 20s, who's got a job, right?
Yeah.
And if you could encourage women to do that, then you'd cut off the supply chain to the feminist agenda. Because if women aren't,
I'd certainly support financial incentives for women to get married and to have kids at an earlier age. I'd certainly support that for sure.
So you need some kind of like, I don't know how you do it. The thing is, when men tell women to do it, women, because they fall back on themselves, you know, they have a self-defense mechanism against men, where if any woman is attacked, they'll fall back on the group, and the group will huddle around them and defend them. So you kind of need ladies that are going to regulate themselves. You need young married women and married women in general to tell young ladies to get married and to stop, you know, messing around, and then they'll listen. And if you could stop them from going to university, if you could make it a trend, a thing, I mean, you need some kind of movement, you know, like I would recommend calling it women's strike, right? Women's strike. Don't go to uni, don't get a job, just get married and sit home and make your husband work for you, right? You phrase it in those terms, you know, force the men to work for you, you know, girl power. And you get something like that going, and you can start a trend and gradually change things.
Yeah, maybe so. We got a question earlier from Spensiferous. He said, Ramspaul once said that nationalism is 1, the right to exist as a people, and 2, the right to a homeland. Do you think that's a good definition? It includes everyone.
The right to exist as a people and the right to a home. Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
Don't have anything wrong with it. Ramsey Paul's
against it, I suppose.
Ramsey Paul's another one that I had conflict with back in the day, because he was making fun of the Stormer. Turns out Ramsey was right. There you go.
Yeah. Colin Liddell has some interesting stuff to say about the Stormer and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I thought they wrote some funny articles when I've occasionally read them.
Oh, I still read it every day. I just read it with a grain of salt, you know.
Yeah, I've read them occasionally, and occasionally their articles are quite amusing, but I don't really take them seriously.
Here we got another question. Right, we're doing questions in the chat now. What is Britishness without white? Is that really a question? What is Britishness without whiteness? Well, yeah, I mean,
doesn't mean much, given the real British people are Anglo-Celts.
Yeah, Anglo-Celts. I don't really like the word Celt. It's a new word. Anglo-Gaelic. It's probably more accurate. Or Anglo. It's not even, because the Welsh aren't really Gaelic. They get lumped in with the Gaelic. They're actually the tribe of the Cymry, and their language is different. So, anyway.
Well, when I say the Celts, I generally include the Scots and the Welsh and the Cornish.
Yeah.
And sometimes the Irish. Sometimes.
It's like a catch.
I include the Irish all the time, but I don't always consider the Irish to be British. Northern Irish are British. They're more people from Scotland originally. It's
like a catch-all phrase, isn't it? I prefer Anglo-Gaelic, but it's more accurate.
It means pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
It's West Europeans who have lived on the British Isles for thousands of years.
Yeah, the British are the real. The Welsh are the real British.
Yeah, the original guys before the Anglo-Saxons. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because
and some of the Highland Scots as well.
Yeah, because the word British comes from Brutus of Troy, which is why I've
talk about this.
I
heard you talk about this, so I did know that. Yeah.
Well, that's why I took the name. Because I thought, well, it's supposed to be a nationalist movement. We're supposed to celebrate our culture, and it's like, well, why isn't anybody talking about the founder, the mythological founder of this nation? All right, so people have to wake up and think about it. Because the way I see it, you've got the history of the nation, and if you go back far enough, it always, you arrive with legends and mythology and so on and so forth. You start diving into all of that stuff, and that's it's pseudo history. You don't really know what happened, but something happened, and it's like a well of creativity and artistic inspiration that you have to dive into to give your nation a purpose and meaning and so on and so forth. We have to remember Brutus of Troy. We have to remember King Arthur. All these things. And
as Tolkien said, the guy who wrote Lord of the Rings, when the Normans invaded the UK, that actually lost the British a lot of their original kind of mythical history.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons he wrote Lord of the Rings, was as kind of a replacement for it, which is why when they're making a new series about it, as they are at the moment, and putting loads of black guys in it, it's just nonsense. They're not supposed to be in it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, the black guys are the orcs,
No. These are people who are going to be playing other parts.
Yeah. No, I know, but I'm just saying they should be.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was William the Conqueror British? No, William the Bastard was certainly not British.
Yeah. They crushed the Welsh to stop them from rebelling. That's why they destroyed their history. That's why original British history has been and Welsh history has been cast aside. It's to stop. The Welsh just would not submit to Saxon rule. It took hundreds of years to conquer that country, especially in the hills. They just wouldn't do it. They refused. A bit like the Irish, just they really like to fight, those guys, and very warlike race of people. And so
from there originally.
Sorry?
Famous English longbow was originally the Welsh longbow.
Yeah, boxing comes from the Irish, doesn't it? I think, as far as I understand it.
Not sure about that, to be honest with you.
Well, it's hang on.
Maybe wrestling more than boxing.
Okay. Right. Well, it's in the Aeneid, boxing.
Yeah.
Virgil's the Aeneid. They have a funeral, and they have the funeral games, and there's a boxing.
The Romans certainly did it. Yeah.
There's a boxing match, and they box with gauntlets. Can you imagine that?
Yeah. They used to wrap strips of metal around their fists and stuff. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
Jesus Christ! Yeah, that's a real boxing match. Never mind a glove.
It's a bit like the Brutus story. It's like the Roman thing in the Aeneid, where the guy comes from Troy.
Yeah.
It's pretty much the sort of thing.
Aeneas comes from Troy. Brutus is his grandson, I think.
Yeah.
So
yeah, pretty the same kind of thing. But myths are quite important to peoples.
Well, the Trojan story was it was celebrated throughout the Middle Ages. I mean, everybody looked at Troy as being like this mythological founder city for Europe. It was the great, even more than Rome and Greece. It was just looked at as just being this wonderful place, and there are all kinds of stories about it and so on and so forth. One of the first books, I think the first book that was ever published in this country was Stories of Troy by Claxton. Yeah, so I mean, it was brilliant. And then of course the Enlightenment comes along, and you've got these Freemasons, and they invent archaeology, and they decide, well, instead of looking at ancient histories, we're just going to throw away what all these ancient historians said. We're going to classify it all as mythology and garbage, and we're going to rewrite all of history and base it on archaeology, base it on stuff that we dug up out of the ground. And they basically rewrote European history, and they tried to dismiss the Trojan War, and they tried to say that it never happened. They tried to just take away this key part of European history and just throw it in the trash bin. But fortunately, somebody went over there and they dug it up and they found the city, and now it's been reestablished as a central part of European history. But that's founding myths are important, and the Trojan War is a central founding myth for the whole of Europe.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with that.
I mean, for the Romans, for the English, for the French as well. They say the Franks were Trojan refugees as well. There's a whole story about that. And so it's something which needs to be thought about, and this is why the Iliad is such an important book. They say it's the first book in the Western canon. It's like, well, yeah, from a historical point.
Aren't you doing a stream with Ataman on the Iliad?
Going to, yeah. I've finished reading it. I've read it before, but I just read Alexander Pope's version, because that's like the famous version that you're supposed to read. So we're going to do it at some point.
Yeah, I'd be interested to watch that. I always thought, like, I first read that in English when I was probably about 11.
Yeah.
And I always thought that Hector was a much more admirable character than Achilles myself. But, there we go. Oh, yeah, because Achilles is like after glory, and also Achilles is a demigod, whereas Hector's just he's a mortal and doing his duty.
He did run away, though, round the walls of Troy 3 times.
Yeah. But he was fighting a demigod who he knew he couldn't beat, and in the end he did fight him.
Yeah, he did.
Knew he couldn't win.
Yeah, he did.
So I think he was a more admirable character in many respects. Like, the Greeks don't come off very well at all, in my opinion, out of the Iliad. Given it's a Greek story, they don't really come off that well from it.
Well, they did. Well, the Trojans could have just given Helen back. You know what I mean? It's
don't get me wrong. That was completely wrong. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when Paris takes Helen away, that's the Trojans totally in the wrong.
Yeah, and Paris is a complete coward. I mean, he has that fight.
Scumbag,
a fight
he's
with
a scumbag.
Yeah, he's having the fight with is it Menelaus? What's the Menelaus? Yeah, he's having the fight with Menelaus, and Venus comes along and just sweeps him away, and quite literally takes him back to his bedchamber. Yep. He's there in bed with Helen.
He's a scumbag. I totally agree. He's
a
vile coward.
And she despises him by that point as well, you know. So to be fair, the Trojans could have just said, they wouldn't have even needed to execute Paris. I mean, they could have said, look, mate, like, there's an army outside. We're going to give her back. You know, you shouldn't have taken her. They could have just done that, and they didn't. So,
No, I don't disagree with that. I just, like, if you look at the 2 main heroes in the story, of the opposing heroes in the story, I just think Hector is more admirable because he fights knowing he won't win.
Right.
And he's trying to protect his family and his home.
Yeah. I mean, Achilles does come off as being utterly ferocious, just like you would know.
Utterly ferocious and also utterly selfish as well.
No, I don't know about that. I mean, he's got a point. Like, he's got a point. Like, they stole, what was her name? Bracis?
Yeah.
They stole, Agamemnon stole Bracis. Mm-hmm. And it was fair of him to not want to fight. It was an injustice.
Don't get me wrong. When the best thing that Achilles does in it, if you ask me, is like when he's having a go at Agamemnon. Yeah, for sure.
Right.
That's when he's at his best. It's some of the other bits, you know, when he's boastful and doing all this other stuff.
What does he do that you don't like specifically?
I just think he's only in it for glory. In fact, he says he's only in it for glory. That's the only reason he's there, is for glory.
What's wrong with that?
Well, speaking as a former soldier, I wouldn't really want to be fighting with someone who was only in it for glory, because I'd be liable to get killed.
Right.
There's an old saying: there are bold soldiers and old soldiers, but there are no old bold soldiers. And, there's some truth to that. It's a bit exaggerated, but not totally. So you have to duck sometimes. I got some interesting scars on my back from not ducking quickly enough. But it's I like Hector. Even when I first read it when I was 11 years old, and I've read that book probably 4 times in different versions now. I've never changed my opinion. Hector's quite an admirable man, and I don't much like Achilles, except when he's having a go at Agamemnon. Then Achilles is okay.
But he is fighting. It's not just for glory. He's fighting because he made a vow to fight. They all made a vow to defend Helen.
Yeah, fair enough.
So it's a combination of the two, which is why I like it, because for me it represents. You can have that kind of mercantile, kind of individualistic self-interest, and you can do your duty at the same time. And there's no contradiction there.
It's a great book, and there's a reason why it's still a classic book, thousands and thousands of years after it was spoken and then written down. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, yeah, it is beautiful. Yeah,
and I mean, heroes are something that we sorely lack these days.
Yeah.
Of any script, like either of the Hector type or the Achilles type, we just are not allowed heroes of any description these days. And the ones we've had, your left wing and your social liberals increasingly just want to tear down.
Yeah, Achilles. I like Achilles. I mean, he had a choice, didn't he? Have a choice. He could either grow old or he could die young and be glorious, something like that. Yeah,
that's true. Yes, it is. Yeah.
I think. I've always pronounced his name wrong. Cuchulainn, the Irish hero.
Yeah.
He has the same choice, actually. He's given the choice of. So one of the druids makes an announcement, like, if you take up arms on this day, you will be glorious, but you will die young. And he immediately takes up arms.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, yeah. I guess heroes, they don't really care about dying. They accept the fact that they're going to die. And they just want to die in as glorious way as possible.
I haven't met too many real humans like that, though, to be honest with you. Not too many at all. Like, I've met guys who were extremely brave, like really, really brave. But generally speaking, the only guys I've seen who are utterly fearless completely lacked imagination.
Right. They're stupid.
They couldn't imagine themselves being hit.
Right. Okay.
And because if you've got any imagination, and particularly if you've seen other people being hit, you know what's going to happen. It was a bit different in the days of full-on hand-to-hand combat when there wasn't much in the way of missile weapons. That was a bit different because that was much more down to your own skill, providing you weren't totally isolated from everybody else. But
because it's a bit random, isn't it? Death in the army now. There's no really ability to not getting shot. Other than
sometimes just luck, mate. It's really sometimes just luck. I mean, there is a lot you can do to increase your chances, but if something's got your name on it, you got a problem. I'll tell you, when I did my first tour to Northern Ireland, and I'm going back to the early 1980s now, all of the guys in my section, we all went and bought a 5.56 bullet, which was an Armalite bullet, which was the main one the provisional IRA were using. And we all wrote our names on it. And we put it on a little keyring that we kept on our belt, because we were working on the lucky assumption that if you've got the bullet with your name on it, number one won't hit you. And you know what? It worked for my section. So, and we did get shot at on a number of occasions.
Oh, so there you go.
This is why superstition catches on, mate. But I've still got it, actually. I've still got it somewhere.
Nice.
But it's there's stuff you could do, training and all the rest of it, to increase your chances. But yeah, at some stages it just becomes random almost. This is one of the reasons the First World War was just so. It was just such a big, huge deal, is because like you would get a heavy shell come over and just atomize you, and it was just where you were standing at the time.
Yeah, so it's all about luck, isn't it? And
yeah,
you got to run. Yourself. You got to run at the enemy lines and just get carved down by, just decimated by a machine gun. It's like there's no skill, there's no honor, there's nothing in it. It's just there's
a lot of courage.
There's a lot of courage, but it's just like the courage of running into a meat grinder. It's nuts.
Yeah. So like, a lot of guys did it. I knew guys who did that when I was like a teenager. Like I was lucky enough to meet quite a lot of guys who'd fought in the First World War, like on Simon at Passchendaele and stuff like that. And they were wonderful old guys. They were always very smart. And like once they found out that this strange 16, 17-year-old boy was interested, they would tell you the most amazing stories. Really, really interesting. Great guys. I mean, really, I often think they must all be rolling in their graves these days when they look at the UK.
Yes. Yeah.
Not what they were fighting.
I just I don't understand. Like we'd already had, obviously the American Revolution was like 150 years before the First World War, but we already had guerrilla warfare. So I don't understand how we got sucked into those trenches, really. I just don't get it. I mean, couldn't we have just retreated and just picked the enemy off? I don't like.
I don't think Britain should have joined the First World War in 1914 in the first place. But even if we did that, we shouldn't have raised a mass land army, which was something Britain had never done, not even during the Napoleonic Wars. And the trouble with the First World War for all the nations, it wasn't just the Brits or the Germans, it was everybody who fought in the First World War. It was the time that it happened. You had huge, great, big, massive mass armies of millions of men, eventually. You had very, very powerful defense. So you had magazine rifles, you had machine guns, you had quick-firing artillery, you had barbed wire, and trenches, obviously. But what you didn't have was modern radios, so that you could do lots and lots of preparation. But once you sent those guys into no man's land to attack the enemy trenches, you couldn't alter anything they were doing hardly, because there was no radios. Right. So you couldn't say, okay, you guys have got to go half a mile to the left and then attack up that trench. You just had to let them go with the original plan, because you couldn't bloody well change it.
Yeah,
it was just that particular period, and why you don't quite see the same thing in the Second World War is purely because radios were a thing in the Second World War. It wasn't really the tank. I mean, the tank had something to do with it, but it was more radios.
Oh, right.
And even then, if you look on the Eastern Front, where the battles were much larger than any on the Western Front in the Second World War. If you look at the battles between the Soviet Union and the Germans on the Eastern Front, the casualties were enormous again. And they did sometimes have kind of trench warfare in places where there weren't enough tanks.
Right.
And that was even with radios. So it was really that just that particular time in history gave you that result. and technology being where it was.
But you say we shouldn't have got involved in it. I mean, what about? I mean, the Germans invaded Belgium, right? And
I wouldn't have killed 1 million British and Commonwealth soldiers for Belgium. I'm sorry, I wouldn't have done.
Right, but we didn't know that 1 million of them were going to die, though.
No, of course not. But the Britain had never raised a huge land army. First of all, I wouldn't have declared war in 1914. I would have declared war probably in 1916, and it would have been mainly a naval war, because the Royal Navy was easily the biggest navy in the world at that stage. Right. I would have used that, and I would then have sent maybe like 8 divisions to France, not the 50 or 60 divisions we eventually really sent. I might have sent 8 divisions to fight on the left flank of the French.
Right.
And I would have kept those topped up with guys, but I would not have expanded it till we had, like, I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but I think it was somewhere between 50 and 60 divisions, I think, the British Army by 1917, when it was at its biggest. And that's why the casualties were so enormous, because if you fight the main body of the enemy for 4 years, you're going to have enormous casualties. And another thing is, even like after the D-Day landings, when the British Liberation Army was fighting against the Germans in Normandy, in some of the infantry battalions, the casualties were almost as heavy as some of the battalions in the First World War. Right. It was just there were less troops fighting, and it only went on for 3 months rather than 4 years. But the casualties were almost as high.
Yeah, so you would have fought a naval war, basically.
Oh, absolutely. That's the traditional British way of fighting. I'd do the same thing now. I'd make the Royal Navy twice the size it is now, and that would be our main armed force. I'd also probably make the Royal Marines a bit bigger as well. The British Army is best used as a projectile that the British Army the British Royal Navy can land somewhere where it will cause the enemy most harm.
Right.
But I would never try and fight a continental war. The British Army at the moment is like about 80,000 blokes, okay? It's the smallest it has been since before William took over England. It's the smallest it's been since then. And if we were fighting against a near-peer enemy, like, say, for example, the Russians, although I see no reason whatever for Britain to fight the Russians, but if we did, as an example, if the British Army was winning, they would be destroyed in about 2 weeks. If they were winning, just through casualties.
Right.
And they have almost no reserves.
Right.
It's ridiculous to plan on using the British Army as an army in Europe. It should be used it can be used great in things like the Falklands War. It can even be used very well in sort of operations like in Afghanistan and Iraq, if you have a plan to go in, do what you got to do, and then get out. But it's not something that should be fighting against major European nations. Right.
So it's more of a hit and run type of thing.
Yeah, exactly right. Like in the Peninsular War, in the Napoleonic Wars, for example, where the British Army did most of its fighting was in Portugal and Spain, because the Royal Navy controlled all the water around Portugal and Spain, which is a peninsula, obviously, and so could put in supplies and reinforcements and all this kind of stuff. And the French could only put limited numbers of troops into Spain.
Right.
And that was the thing we should have done in the First World War, and we wouldn't have had 1 million casualties. And we would still have won.
So you think it wasn't Homer's secret Iliad? What is that? Do you think we... what was I going to say? It wasn't actually... I mean, this is a point that Hitchens made. He said it wasn't so crazy for Neville Chamberlain to declare war against Hitler, because Neville Chamberlain was not planning on landing troops on the continent. He was just, planning on enforcing a naval blockade. And perhaps
he was going to have a few divisions there, but not many, yes.
Yeah, either starving Germany. I don't know how they could starve Germany, but anyway, either starving them or just forcing the Germans to get rid of Hitler or whatever. That was his idea. So he didn't actually want... So, I mean, they call it the phony war. Like, nothing much was really happening, was it, for quite a few months? Yeah. So it was.
Except at sea, the Royal Navy was fighting quite hard at sea.
Right. So it wasn't like completely, because you know what the Nat Sox said. They say, "Oh, we were completely unprepared for the war, and it was stupid to declare war at that point. We had no chance." Actually, we had no chance of putting an army to defend Poland. I mean, that's true, but that was never going to be our tactic in the first place.
I think Britain was in a very awkward position. I mean, first of all, like the Royal Navy, for example, had been planning for a war that would break out in about 1942. Right. If the war had broken out in 1942, the Royal Navy would have been much more modern and much stronger than it was in 1939. It was still the largest navy in the world in 1939, but only just. The Americans were almost as big in 1939, and they overtook the Royal Navy sometime in the second half of 1943. But the problem Britain had in World War II was that we couldn't win a short war because we had to depend on blockade, and we couldn't afford a long war.
Right.
And this is what happened. Britain was bankrupt by 1941. In fact, an American warship, I think it was either in 41 or 42, an American cruiser was sent to Cape Town to take the last of the British gold reserves away to America.
Yeah.
Because don't forget, Britain got no Lend-Lease or anything like that until every single bit of British bullion and all the British companies in America had been sold for knockdown prices. And Churchill's problem was because he was half American, his mother was American.
Yeah.
He never really saw that America was not so much a British ally in the Second World War as it regarded the British Empire as a rival, which it was very happy to cripple.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's been our problem for a long time, this whole special relationship thing.
Yeah, it's mostly bullshit.
Yeah, people don't understand that I think we've got a special relationship with Canada and Australia and New Zealand, definitely.
Yeah, they're British Commonwealth countries, of course. They've fought in many wars alongside British soldiers, and we fought many wars alongside them. Like the first Australian troops to fight alongside British troops were in the Sudan in the 1880s during the Gordon Relief Expedition. So it's got a pretty long history.
Yeah, the Yankees have got a bit of a chip on their shoulder, unfortunately.
Oh, listen, I've known a lot of good American military guys. Some of them very good guys, some of them are mates. But the idea that British and American interests are always the same is ridiculous, because they're not, and they certainly weren't in the Second World War.
Yeah. So I mean, didn't we have to end up giving them the gold because we didn't pay back our original debt from the First World War?
Well,
and that's
Britain had a lot of had debts with America in the First World War. But we also had debts from France and other European countries like Italy and Belgium that we actually cancelled. We said, okay, you can't really afford to pay us back. Don't worry about it. Americans didn't do that to the British.
Ah, right. Okay.
And like another example, in the Napoleonic Wars, Britain provided loads and loads and loads of money for the Prussians and the Russians and the Austrians who were fighting against Napoleon. We gave them loads of aid, basically, money. We also gave them things like uniforms, swords, thousands upon thousands of Brown Bess muskets, cannons, you name it. And we didn't do a Lend-Lease thing with them. We just gave them to them.
Yeah.
Whereas the American Lend-Lease thing, after the war, Britain spent donkey's years paying that shit back.
Yeah.
And of course, the Russians just didn't. The Russians got far more Lend-Lease stuff than the Brits did, but Stalin just said, get stuffed,
Yeah.
Of course, British didn't do that, needless to say.
No.
So, and then you come up to stuff like Suez in 1956, which was a balls-up operation. But the Americans still certainly didn't support the British.
No.
The idea they didn't know about it is absolute nonsense, because they did.
Yeah, they wanted to rule the world. They've always had a chip on their shoulder.
Well, they didn't want Britain and France to be able to act independently without them. That's what they wanted.
Yeah.
So the NatSoc guys are not. I think Britain was stupid going to war over Poland, and the main reason I think we were stupid going to war over Poland was what Chamberlain did, because he was so annoyed at Hitler breaking his word so quickly after Munich. Was he basically gave the Poles a red button that they could push that said Britain goes to war.
Yeah.
He just gave them the button. Instead of leaving that in his own hands where it should be, or with the British Parliament, he gave it to Poland. And Poland, people now forget, of course, was actually a military dictatorship in 1939. It wasn't exactly a great place itself,
Well, apparently, I mean, according to Daughter of Albion, they were actually deporting the Jews. Not many NatSocs will admit that, but they were dealing with the Jewish question themselves.
Yeah, there was certainly quite a lot of anti-Semitism in Poland prior to World War II, for sure.
Yeah, so they were kind of not so dissimilar from the Nazis, funny enough. But
at one stage, there was quite a lot of talk of a German-Polish pact against the Russians.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, of course, that the Natsocks never talk about is that what happened in 1939 was that the German foreign minister Ribbentrop and the Soviet communist foreign minister Molotov signed the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact, which in fact made the USSR and Hitler's Germany basically allies.
Yeah. No, they never admit that. They never. No. They say they always have a go at Churchill. Oh, Churchill and Stalin. Oh, and it's like, well, hang on a minute. You know, Germany quite literally got into bed with the Soviet Union, and they say, oh, it's different though. It was different. Oh, how is it different?
I'll tell you, Bruce. In one of the things that the Soviets did for the Germans, for example, was the Germans had armed merchant raiders in World War II, which were like disguised warships. They looked like a merchant ship, but they had loads of guns on them, and torpedo tubes and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. And the Russians, Stalin got one of the Soviet icebreakers to run along the top end of Russia to make a channel for this German armed merchant raiders to come out into the Pacific to attack British ships.
Right.
But they were virtually allies. I mean, they carved up Poland between them.
Yeah.
After the German invasion, the Soviets invaded from the eastern side.
Yeah.
And then Stalin was still sending train loads of raw materials and all this kind of stuff to Hitler on the day Barbarossa started, when Hitler invaded Russia. And for hours, Stalin wouldn't even believe that his mate Hitler had invaded it.
So you don't believe that Stalin was planning to invade Germany?
I think eventually that sort of a military-style dictator is going to do that. I don't think he would have been in a position to do so within like a couple of years or so. I think by 1943, 1944, maybe. Yeah, he might well have done.
Right.
But I mean, that would have given the Germans an awful lot of time to prepare their defenses.
Yeah. Because I mean,
they wanted to do that.
The thing is, the way I see it, like Hitler never really had a chance to win the war because he never had enough. He never had enough fuel. For one thing.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
I mean, he had something coming from Romania, but I mean, if you really wanted, I mean, first of all, this whole idea that he wanted to rescue the Russians from the evil communists is nonsense, because he wanted to imprison the Slavs and turn them into slaves.
Yeah.
But I mean, anyway, if you are running with the narrative that Hitler had to, go east to smash communism or whatever, the only really realistic way he would have done it would have been with a alliance with Britain, which is what he wanted. And if he'd had that, then he would have had the fuel, and he would have had a chance. But he didn't get it, so he was just out of control. He started a war which he couldn't win.
You've got to look at Hitler. I mean, first of all, he remilitarized the Rhineland. That was the first thing he did. And the French weren't willing to do anything about that because the British wouldn't back them. Because the British turned around and said, "Okay, look, the Rhineland's part of Germany. If the Germans want to reoccupy it, fair enough." And Hitler was so nervous at that stage that he told the battalion commanders of the units that were reoccupying that if the French appeared to fight, they were to fall back. Right. Of course, the French didn't. So then he did the Anschluss thing with Austria, and actually, German Nazis had been working on that stuff for ages. And yes, okay, the vast majority of Austrians were not that too upset about it.
Yeah.
But there were still Austrians who didn't like it. And it was still an illegal invasion of another country.
I'm not so sure. I mean, the Natsocks like to say the Austrians are in favor. It seems to me like the younger generation, perhaps, I mean, because that's what the Nazis were. It was a youth movement.
Yeah.
But the older generation didn't want it. I mean, it's much like the younger generation today. They want to join the European Union. And the older generation's like, nope. And these Natsocks will say, oh, but when Hitler marched in there, they were on the streets celebrating. Well, you can see people celebrating for the European Union in this country. So it doesn't really mean anything,
Yeah, that's absolutely true. It certainly is. But there wasn't any fighting, so I mean, you've got to look at that. But it was still an illegal invasion of another nation.
Yeah.
And then,
What was the treaty
Hitler
that they
takes his
broke?
side.
I forget.
Sorry?
What was the treaty? What was the treaty?
That was the oh, for God's sake, it's to do with the Brenner Pass.
Yeah.
And this brings you on to another thing, because Mussolini was really pissed off at Hitler for invading Austria.
Yeah.
Because Mussolini considered Austria in his sphere of influence, and he actually sent Italian troops. It was the Treaty of Locarno you're thinking of.
Yeah, I can't find it. Treaty of Locarno.
Yeah, Treaty of Locarno. It was like everyone was guaranteeing Austria, basically, and other nations. So
yeah, because I mean it's just to make it clear, because it's not actually, it wasn't about the Treaty of Versailles. That's the point. A lot of people seem to be confused, and they seem to think that Austria was part of Germany before the First World War, but that's not actually true at all.
No, it was the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which was huge.
Yeah. So it was a different peace treaty. It wasn't the Treaty of Versailles he was reversing, but nonetheless, there was a treaty in place, and Hitler broke it. And I mean, in my opinion, that's what really triggered the war, because it led.
But you've also got to look, as I said, that Mussolini was really annoyed at this. He sent Italian troops to the Brenner Pass in the Alps, and Mussolini was not a big pal of Hitler. Like, there were quite significant differences between Italian-style fascism and National Socialism in Germany.
Yeah,
quite significant. And the trouble was, Britain, or actually it was Anthony Eden, the same twat as Prime Minister who did the Suez thing, when he was at the Foreign Office, he turned Mussolini into an enemy of Britain by attacking him over the Italian invasion of Abyssinia, what's now called Ethiopia.
Yeah.
And that was not a vital British interest. It wasn't a vital British interest.
Yeah, it's so dumb.
Why did Britain give two shits who ran Abyssinia? In fact, the Abyssinians would have probably been better off if they'd been run by the Italians.
Yeah.
And we'd supported Italy in that part of the world, like previously, over the previous 40 years, because Italy had been involved in that part of the world since at least since the middle of the 1890s. They lost a huge battle there against the Abyssinians at a place called Adwa in 1896 that made his own Luana look small beer. But that was really why Mussolini invaded. It was revenge for Adwa. And the British did not need to antagonize Mussolini and the Italians over that. And had we not done so, it is possible, not certain by any means, but possible, that Italy wouldn't have backed Germany in World War II. Which would have made Britain's problems vastly easier, because the Italians had a big fleet in the Mediterranean.
Yeah, I forget the name. There's it's talked about in that book by Churchill's, but there was some kind of agreement, wasn't there? There was some kind of unified agreement between England, France, and Italy to support Austria. And
the Locarno Pact, I think it's called.
Locarno Pact, and we lost it. Yeah, for Egypt, for Ethiopia. I mean, it's absurd.
For Ethiopia, it was like, and like, you know, the Italians already had territories in that part of the world.
Yeah,
like there was Italian Somaliland, there was Eritrea, etc., which were already Italian territories, and the Italian colonists got on fine with the British colonists in places like Kenya, etc.
Yeah.
So we had no need to make them an enemy over that stuff, and that was mainly Anthony Eden. He was an idiot.
Yeah,
didn't have anything to do with Churchill, by the way.
Right. Well, Churchill. Yeah. What about, how did we lose the Japanese? Did Churchill have something to do with that?
Not really, because the thing was, like, the Anglo-Japanese naval agreement started in 1902. It was the first international alliance that Britain entered in for about 100 years.
Right, because this is interesting to me. We had a policy of splendid isolation, didn't we?
Under the brilliant Lord Salisbury, yes.
Yeah, everybody seems, I hear a lot of people saying good things about Lord Salisbury.
Yeah, he was excellent.
Yeah, okay.
But so we went into this treaty, and what that treaty basically said was that if Britain or Japan was attacked by more than one enemy, so if one country attacked you, you didn't have to do anything. But if, say, two countries attacked you, then the other one had to come to your aid.
Right.
So, for example, when Japan fought Russia in the 1904 war, Britain didn't have to interfere in that because it was just two nations against each other. But if France had joined in, then Britain would have had to have joined in, and that would have meant that Japan would have won even more easily than they did against Russia anyway. So
yeah,
that went on until 1922. Now, after the First World War, there was going to be a naval race between Britain and America, basically, because the Royal Navy had this enormous fleet at the end of World War One, I should say. Yeah. And of course, the German fleet mostly sculled itself, and what was sculled was captured. And so the next biggest navy was the Americans, and the Americans could just about have afforded a big naval race, and Britain could just about have afforded a big naval race, but neither country really wanted to do it. And so they had the Washington Naval Treaty. And as part of that treaty, the Americans insisted that the British get rid of the Anglo-Japanese Naval Alliance, because Britain and Japan together would have been much too powerful for the Americans to fight.
Yeah.
And at the same time, of course, the Americans didn't give the British an alliance with them. So we got rid of a good alliance and incidentally, in World War One, the Japanese fought on the British side as part of the alliance. They even sent warships to the Mediterranean and stuff.
Wow.
And they captured German colonies in the Far East and all this kind of thing. So the Japanese held up their end of the bargain. But then we were made to get rid of it in 1922 for no treaty with the Americans. And as a result of that, the Royal Navy then spent the next 20-odd years planning for a war against Japan, which they could plainly see was now going to come.
Yeah, and wasn't that Churchill's fault or not? Who
not
organized?
Really. The only way Churchill affected that was he was Chancellor of the Exchequer for a while, and when the British were trying to build their naval base at Singapore, the defences were skimped because Churchill was Chancellor and wouldn't give any money for it. So that's about the only way he had anything much to do with that. His next problem, Churchill.
But it was a stupid mistake. I mean, it's another case of. We trust the Americans. We think they're our friends. And okay.
I'm not a big I don't hate Churchill, but I don't like him as a naval and military commander. He made far more mistakes than good decisions. Yeah. In that role. He was probably a great sort of inspiring guy for speeches and this kind of stuff, but his decisions about the Royal Navy in particular, but also the British Army, were generally not good. Yeah,
I think he had a kind of heroic spirit, but
he did. But he was his only actual experiences in the military was as a cavalry officer in charge of about 30 cavalry troopers.
Right.
And he was very brave. He took part in the charge of the 21st Lancers at the Battle of Omdurman against the dervishes and all this kind of stuff. And he fought in the Anglo-Boer War. He fought on the northwest frontier of India. But he never rose very high in the army because he wasn't interested in the army. He was only using it to get attention for his political career. And
he escaped from prison as well, didn't he?
In South Africa, yes, he did. Yeah. He did manage to escape from prison. He then wrote a book about it, which made him very famous and helped him get elected to Parliament.
Yeah, I think that's how he first got famous, isn't it? It was like quite an adventure story, which was told in the paper.
But he'd also wrote an excellent book called The Malacan Field Force about a campaign on the Northwest Frontier. He wrote another excellent book called The River War, which is about the campaign to reconquer the Sudan under Kitchener. So he was already writing stuff,
Yeah.
But he wasn't very popular with his fellow officers. People regarded him as a bit bumptious. And he was a bit showy, like he got himself a white horse on the Northwest Frontier, which no one with any brains did because it got you fired up. But he wanted to get noticed, and he thought the risk of getting shot was worth it. But as I say, he wasn't a coward. He was a brave guy, but he wasn't a good commander, let us say. And like his next contribution
It was quite
disaster in the Far East was when Britain was sending convoys of brand new British Hurricane and Spitfire fighters and brand new British tanks to the Soviet Union via the Arctic convoys, which were very expensive in terms of ships and lives that the Royal Navy was escorting, because they were being attacked by U-boats, they were being attacked by German surface forces, and they were also constantly being attacked by aircraft. And Stalin wasn't mostly even using this stuff; he was just letting it rot.
Oh, geez.
And he, in the meantime, the British Army had not a single tank, or the RAF had not a single modern aircraft in Malaya and Singapore when the Japanese attacked.
Yeah,
that was Churchill.
Yeah, but he was quite, I don't know, well read. I mean, he did do those like 4 volumes of English history. So it seems like
he was a great writer. I nothing against his writing. He was an excellent writer. His command of English was tremendous.
It seems like he had a kind of heroic understanding of history, and he could see that he had to stand up to Hitler. He could see like the historical significance of what was happening, and why it was necessary to maintain a balance of power in Europe.
By the time he became prime minister, he probably did.
Yeah, but he didn't perhaps have the military expertise to manage the situation correctly. Perhaps that's what.
Yeah, but what I mean to say is that, like, Nazoks forget that World War II, Britain declared war on Germany in World War II under Chamberlain.
Yeah,
and it was months and months and months before Churchill became prime minister.
Well, yeah, bang on. But to be fair, though, Chamberlain was kind of forced to declare war on Hitler because of the political pressure placed on him by Churchill.
No, that's not true. It really isn't. Churchill was. You got to one thing you have to understand about Churchill, and a lot of people don't nowadays, is that Churchill changed parties twice. Right. He joined the Conservative Party. He left the Conservative Party because of a thing called imperial tariff preference, which was basically to make trade between Britain, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and South Africa cheaper and easier. And we would have put some tariffs on stuff coming from, say, Germany or America. And Churchill didn't like that. So he left the Conservative Party and joined the Liberals. And then later on, when the Liberals were doing something he didn't like, he rejoined the Conservative Party. And this was the time when which people describe as the wilderness years, when he was a backbench MP, and he was totally distrusted by most of the Conservative leadership, and rightly so, because of what he'd done in terms of changing parties. You know, it'd be like someone these days going from the Conservative Party to the Labour Party and then back to the Conservative Party again. You wouldn't get a very good reputation. And Churchill did that. So his influence on Chamberlain has been fairly heavily exaggerated, not least by Churchill himself. Like, the real reason that Chamberlain gave this red button to Poland was because he was so fucking, excuse my language, he was so annoyed at Hitler for breaking his word so soon after Munich.
Well, he embarrassed him, isn't it? It's like a
he made him look a fool. He made him look an idiot.
Yeah.
And so, and also one has to remember that, like, in 1938, most of the British public would have said no to war at the time of Munich. Most British people did not want another war. Too many families had people who had been killed and maimed in World War I. They knew what was going to happen. And don't forget, everyone thought it was going to be another war like World War I, with like thousands and thousands of guys getting killed in the trenches. And no one knew at that stage that the French army would collapse very quickly and that Britain would actually spend half the war with only a few divisions fighting in the Middle East. So people didn't want to fight a war. But after after Hitler betrayed his word to Chamberlain, betrayed the treaty he'd signed at Munich, and said, "I'm going to invade Poland," all the British public got behind Chamberlain and said, "No, you got to go to war." Yeah,
it was an insult. I think he just didn't understand British kind of the gentlemanly sense of fair play that we had.
Yeah,
and he just didn't. I don't know. He underestimated Neville Chamberlain's kind of polite British manners, I suppose. He thought he mistook him. He thought he was a weakling, and that's it. No, it was really dumb. It was really, really dumb of him.
It
really
was
stupid.
It was stupid because like he had no way of beating Britain because the Royal Navy was like, first of all, the Royal Navy was vastly bigger than the German Navy. But during the Norwegian campaign, the Royal Navy and the Norwegians between them sank about a quarter of what navy the Germans did have. So that in 1940, during the Battle of Britain and stuff, and this is not saying that the Battle of Britain fighter pilots were not brave. Of course they were. They went out 3 or 4 times a day, sometimes outnumbered 50-1. They were very, very brave young men. But even if the RAF had lost the Battle of Britain, they would have withdrawn to northern England, which was out of range of the German fires. And the Germans still couldn't have invaded England because the Royal Navy was vastly more powerful than the German Navy. So even if the Germans had managed to sneak somehow or other one wave of troops ashore, the Royal Navy would have steamed south and cut them off from all further supplies of ammunition, food, water, and everything you need to keep an army alive.
Yeah.
You see, Sea Lion was a fantasy operation that couldn't happen. So all this stuff about, oh, Hitler didn't want to invade Britain. Hitler couldn't invade Britain. He had no chance of doing so.
Yeah.
And NatFox will never admit that, but it's a fact. If you just look at the naval figures for a start, it was never going to happen.
Yeah, we've always had quite an advantageous position. I mean, we've basically got a fortress, on the edge of Europe. It's airstrip 1.
Yeah,
so
it's got this moat around it. And then by the time Churchill becomes prime minister and Hitler is kind of sort of signaling about a peace, Britain wouldn't have got a peace without losing loads of territory. So we would almost certainly have lost the Sudan. We would almost certainly have lost Egypt. We would certainly have lost Malta. We might well have lost Gibraltar, and we probably would have lost the Channel Islands. All of those British areas, and that would have been the absolute minimum that Hitler would have required for a peace deal.
Well, the thing is,
a fair peace. It would have been Britain surrendering stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, and also it's just a case of they would have eventually, after 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 years or whatever, somebody in Germany, maybe not Hitler himself, but whoever follows him, they would have said, let's have a go at England now, right? Let's crack on.
Yeah, so, there was never going to be a peace deal. It was like once the fighting had started, it was going to carry on. My criticism of Churchill is not so much that he fought on, it's that we sent so much as a second-hand pair of army boots to the Russians. I wouldn't have sent them anything. I would have let the German and Russian armies kill each other to the very last man, and I wouldn't much have cared who won.
Yeah, I mean, they say that Stalin was just putting pressure on Churchill to do something. But what
pressure could he really put?
Yeah, exactly. apart from just complaining. I mean, the
pressure he could put is he could threaten to make a separate peace. That was the only pressure he could put. But that would have been giving Hitler half of Russia for most of the war. So I don't think that was going to happen very likely.
The smart thing for us to do would have been to just stay on the sidelines and let those two, people kill each other.
Absolutely right. I would have let the last Prussian grenadier and the last bloody Soviet guardsman kill each other. Wouldn't have worried me in the slightest. But then I'm a British nationalist, not a white nationalist.
Yeah. Yeah, and then just kind of roll in at the end and clean up the mess. Clean
up all the Western Europe that wouldn't have gotten taken over by the bloody Soviets. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the other thing the Nazis don't mention, of course, is that Hitler's piss up in losing resulted in most of Central Europe being taken over by the communists. And
some people say Germany. Some people say the whole thing's a conspiracy, and they say that Hitler was a Bolshevik who did what he did specifically to give the Soviet Union the chance to invade. I don't know if it's true or not. I mean, it's not a narrative I want to run with because it's too...
That would be going a bit far from my conspiracy theory acceptances, to be honest with you.
I mean, he was a spy. He was a spy when he joined the National Socialist Party.
Oh yeah, he was working for the German army. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Initially, I mean, it's just too much of a crazy narrative to feed to people. I mean, I just prefer the narrative of he had some good ideas. He said some good things, but he started, there was no need for that war. He could quite easily have just been the dictator of Germany, and nobody would have disturbed him.
Well, Germany, including Austria, and also including like half of Czechoslovakia. Yeah. All of that stuff he'd been given.
Yeah.
It would have, and that's a lot bigger than Germany is today.
Yeah, he would have. Yeah, he could have kept all of it. I mean, we never. People say, "Oh, we had to get rid of the dictatorship." We never bothered with Franco, right?
Yep. No.
Just left him alone. He was all right.
He wasn't stupid enough to declare war.
Yeah. Never even bothered with
Hitler wanted him to declare war because he wanted him to attack Gibraltar. And Franco would go to Hitler and give him an enormous list of all the things he needed for the Spanish armed forces that he knew the Germans couldn't give him.
Right.
And in the end, Hitler just gave up on him. Because Franco had no intention of going to war because he knew damn well that if Hitler lost, that would have been Spain right up the junction, And there he was. He sat in Spain until the 1970s or 80s, wasn't it?
Yeah, he did quite a good job as well.
The other fellow in what was his name? Is Alonso in Portugal? He was also pretty close to being a fascist,
right?
And ruled for years and years and years because he never invaded anyone.
Yeah. This is what people don't understand. It's like nowadays, because of the whole, neoconservative agenda, it's taken for granted that if there's a dictatorship, you have to invade that country and blow it up. But back then, I think we, the British, we just looked at European. I think we looked down on them for having dictatorships, and we thought they were a bit inferior to us. But we definitely didn't want to start a war with them for it. No,
the British people. Don't forget, World War I only ended in 1918. So, like in 1938, when the Munich crisis was on, it was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And there was hardly a family in the land that didn't have a black-edged photograph of someone who got killed in the trenches or somewhere.
Hang on, we got someone in the chat. Aaron Hook. I don't know if you want to highlight it. Anyway, as long as Mussolini was in charge of Italy with his dreams of a neo-Roman empire, Italy was eventually going to end up as a rival against Britain, regardless of Eden's idiotic acts at the FO. What's the FO?
Foreign Office.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So what do you think of that?
Possibly. I'd only say possibly.
Yeah, I mean, Mussolini, I think he just wanted to conquer a few countries.
If he'd have been given a free hand with Abyssinia, that's a pretty big country. He already had Eritrea and he already had Italian Somaliland. He had some territories like in Albania and places like that. He would have liked Malta for sure. And Britain had Cyprus, of course, and Gibraltar at the other end of the Mediterranean. And Egypt was British, and so was the Sudan. And I don't think Mussolini had really... If Britain wasn't in a war against Germany, there wasn't much chance. Well, there was no chance whatever, actually, of Mussolini like taking Egypt or the Sudan. None whatsoever. I mean, don't forget, when Mussolini did declare war, a British army, which included Indian and Australian troops, of 38,000 men, totally destroyed an Italian army of over 200,000 men in 1940 under Sir Richard O'Connor, the brilliant British general. So Mussolini, I don't think Mussolini was really stupid enough to think that he could take on Britain on his own.
No. It'd be like taking on America or something. I mean, you have to be pretty dumb. Why would you do that?
Italy had a powerful, medium-sized navy that could operate in the Mediterranean and a little bit in the Red Sea. But they couldn't take on the Royal Navy on their own at all.
Why do you invade Greece then? What was all that about? He's just
that was merely because he was worried that Hitler was stealing all the glory, with France and Belgium and Poland before that, and Norway and Denmark, of course, which Hitler also invaded. And it was just he thought, I'll go and do this and win some glory for my side. But then, of course, the Greeks threw him back.
Yeah.
And then Churchill made another one of his mistakes, and instead of letting O'Connor clean up all the Italian forces in North Africa, he sent one British armored division and an Australian and a New Zealand infantry division to Greece. And like three British Commonwealth divisions, even if they were the very best troops in the world, were not going to be able to beat like 15 German divisions. It just wasn't going to happen. And the British knew damn well that at least 15 German divisions were going to invade Greece.
Right.
It was an idiotic move that just got loads of people killed and also loads of Royal Navy ships sunk evacuating them.
Jeez. Yeah.
It was an idiot move, and it also meant that we ended up with the Northwest African campaign, the Battle of El Alamein and all this stuff that went on for nearly 3 years. When if O'Connor had been left those troops, he could have probably completely cleaned up all the Italian possessions in North Africa. And there wouldn't have been this war against the Africa Corps and Rommel and all this stuff. And all those troops could have been used somewhere else, like, for example, in the Far East against the Japanese.
So it was a dumb move. Yeah.
Yeah, it was an idiot move. Absolutely idiot move.
Do you think that whole invasion of Greece... Well, I mean, I don't believe this is true, but this is something that the NatSocs say. The invasion of Greece lost Hitler the war because it meant that he had to postpone Operation Barbarossa, which meant that they got stuck in the Russian winter. You don't believe in that?
No, not at all, because the source of that is actually Winston Churchill.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, Churchill used that as an excuse as to why it was worth aiding Greece. But it was nonsense, because in Russia they get these different types of climate. Like Phil would know much more about this than I do, but they have one bit like in between, kind of like in the spring in Russia, they have a period when it pisses down with rain and the roads are all mud, and like there were very few tarmac roads in Russia in the Soviet Union. They were mostly dirt, and so you have to wait until that stops before you can do anything much in Russia with like big armored columns and tanks and all this kind of stuff. So Hitler couldn't have invaded much earlier anyway. Might have been 1, maybe 2 weeks in it at the most.
Right. Okay.
Certainly not enough to change Barbarossa.
Okay.
And also the German supply officers, the senior German supply guys, had told Hitler, look, we can go so many hundreds of miles into Russia, and then our trucks are all going to have broken down, and we won't have enough fuel. And they went just about exactly as far as those supply guys told Hitler they would go.
Yeah.
So it's
a lot of stupid people making mistakes.
Oh, look, listen, all of these great men, supposedly, they all make errors and stuff. I mean, of course they do, because they're all human. But I don't think you can compare Churchill, for example, to somebody like Pitt the Elder.
Pitt the Elder, right?
Pitt the Elder was brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Right.
I don't think that Churchill measures up to him at all. I'm not sure if Churchill even measures up to Pitt the Younger either, to be honest with you.
Right. Oh, this is Napoleonic Wars we're talking about. Oh no,
Pitt the Younger was the Napoleonic Wars. Pitt the Elder was the guy who won all the great British victories that he won in India. He chucked the French out of Canada, all that kind of stuff,
Yeah, we're gonna have to do this. We'll have to do a massive stream, or it'd be like an epic project, but like do all the prime ministers.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Yeah, I'd love to just go through the whole chronology of it, and
not many of them I like much, to be honest with you. I like Pitt the Elder. I don't mind Disraeli, strange to say, and I really like Salisbury. Salisbury, I think, was the best guy.
Right. Yeah. Tony Blair? No.
I would hang him in Minecraft.
Yeah, you quite like Thatcher though, don't you?
Oh yeah, Thatcher was all right. She had her faults. She didn't see that Britain really needed to retain some sort of manufacturing base, I don't think. And also she woke up to what the European Union was really about very late in the day. And by that stage, like John Major and these other scumbags were ready to stab her in the back.
Yeah, I mean, she did die friendless, basically. She became a very, very old, lonely woman, and all these Tories. I mean, I just remember thinking that at the time when she I remember reading something about it, and I just thought, wow, these politicians, they're just such heartless people. Like this woman was your leader. I mean, regardless of what you think of her, she was like your leader, and now she's just old and friendless, and nobody will talk to her. It's like, it's awful.
Well, isn't that the way? Isn't that the way? The other bloke I don't mind is, and he was a liberal actually, was Palmerston. He was all right. Palmerston was pretty good. He was the guy who was fully into gunboat diplomacy and this kind of stuff.
Was he Irish?
Palmerston, not really. You got to remember that most of the you could say that the Duke of Wellington was born in Ireland, but he wasn't Irish. Like most of the Anglo-Irish ascendancy, as it was called, like the aristocracy in Ireland, most of them were Protestants. Not all of them. There were Catholic aristocrats as well, but the majority of them were actually Protestants and didn't really regard themselves as Irish.
Yeah, this is in the book that I was just reading about. They said he presided over basically, a very glorious period in the British Empire, put it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, no, Palmerston was pretty good. So they're probably the main ones I like, to be honest with you, British prime ministers.
What about Peel and the police force?
Not really much to say about that. I've actually just finished reading Wellington, Pillar of State by Elizabeth Longford, which is about when Wellington was a politician who was twice prime minister.
Right.
And also was the guy who first allowed Catholics to openly serve in the army and the navy and become members of parliament.
Right.
That was Wellington's doing. And that's got quite a lot to say about Peel and all the rest of it, but I don't find them particularly impressive, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Have you read Peter Hitchens' Brief History of Crime?
I don't think I have. That's about the only one I haven't read of his books.
Oh, that was fantastic. Yeah, I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I'll have to read that at some stage. It's about the only one I think I haven't read.
Well, he was just making the point that when Peel introduced the police force, there was a lot of resistance to it because they considered it to be basically a European invention. Basically, I think, as far as I understand it, the police force originally came out of the French Revolution. And before that, we didn't really have a police force, and it was considered to be part of our English liberty,
Well, on the other hand, if you got too uppity, they'd use the army and shoot you.
Yeah, but apparently there was still a lot of crime, so the police force turned into something that was good. And I just thought it's interesting. I mean, considering we've got all this talk now in America of getting rid of the police, and
I don't think it'll get very far, that stuff, to be honest with you.
Well, people are complaining.
Disaster.
People are complaining about it, but it is actually quite a conservative position. So, considering that the police force comes from the French Revolution, but anyway.
Oh yeah, originally I suppose it would be. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, also in America, you've at least got the thing that there's a lot of people who are armed in America, and that tends to keep down crime a bit.
I guess
if it's legal arms, it tends to keep crime down a bit because the criminals risk getting shot.
Yeah, 100% believe in that. I mean, I guess they always had sheriffs, though, didn't they?
Yeah, I'm not sure when they came in, to be honest with you. I mean, obviously Britain had sheriffs at one stage, like the Sheriff of Nottingham in Robin Hood and so on.
Yeah. Anyway, I better phone my mum. She's called me
all right,
times.
It's been nice chatting with you. And if you want to do one on Boxing Night, just bung me an email some stage on Boxing Day. Yeah.
Well, we should. Didn't Ataman and Sojo say they're going to come on or not? Or what? What did they say?
I haven't asked them, to be honest with you, mate.
Oh, okay.
I put up. Actually, I don't think I even mentioned it in my Discord now that I think about it.
Oh, okay.
But I will.
All right. Are you going to?
But yeah, I think we should definitely have a couple of other people on if we do one unboxing that.
Are you going to?
Then people will be sick of turkey and all that stuff. So
yeah, are you going to give it a name, like a name for the show?
Why, have you got a suggestion?
No, I don't know. Maybe we should ask people in the chat.
Go on then. Someone in the chat. What would you call it?
Or maybe we'll figure it out Boxing Day. I don't know, but we should pick some kind of.
I might just call it a Boxing Day stream or something like that.
Salisbury's Revenge. I don't know.
Yeah, could be.
Glorious Isolation. Anyway, whatever.
Splendid Isolation.
Isolation. Yeah, that would be quite a good one. That would be quite a good name.
Splendid Isolation might not be bad because that's quite an interesting period in British history. We had a two-power standard navy at that stage, so the Royal Navy had to be stronger than the next two navies in the world combined.
Yes. Yeah.
And so you could afford to have splendid isolation with that.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, mate. It's been nice talking to you, and happy Christmas. Happy Christmas to the viewers, and hopefully everyone has a good New Year too.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. All right. Good night, mate.
Good night, guys.
All right.